everyone. We will call the Community Redevelopment Agency meeting to order. I would ask if there are any amendments to the minutes of the November 14th, 2022 meeting.
Move to approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. This time I want to open it up to citizens to be heard. If there are any citizens in the audience that would like to speak to items that are not on the agenda, we ask you to come up, sign a signature card, and respectfully ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes. Seeing none, item 4.1.
Discuss active CRA grants.
Good morning, Matt Jackson, CRA Assistant Director. The purpose of this agenda item is to discuss open CRA grants as well as any potential revisions to the grants. Regarding the presentation, it was brought to my attention that one of the photos was used twice and it shouldn't have been. That has been revised and it's been sent to the clerk's office, so the updated presentation is available. I do want to talk specifically about the Immersive Museum, Scorpion Brewing Hall, and the Nolan, but I just want to know first, would you like me to go through the slideshow or just have any questions or just go through those three?
Let's go through the slideshow first, and then you can do the update on the specific projects, then we'll go to questions.
Be glad to do that. So the first slide, as you can see, is just a summary of all of the grants that are outstanding and active, broken down by the physical grant, whether it be the white box commercial beautification, business renovation, or vacancy, as well as any monies that have been reimbursed, and comments discussing maybe where the project is at, when the grant was improved, or specific to the Nolan, that they're pretty much paid out except for 10% remaining, which was part of their agreement until they had their CO. The Scorpion.
Matt, just a question.
Yes.
Vice Mayor.
On that first page when we're talking about the Nolan, the last group, where they've received their funds except for 10% of payment withheld until certificate of occupancy, do we have an anticipated date for certificate of occupancy?
Wonderful question, yes. So I apologize, not for the certificate of occupancy. So March 1st, after that, if they've not asked for an extension, they will not be eligible to request those funds.
10%, okay.
We have not been provided an update on when they expect the CO. What I foresee to happen based on our last conversation is that for the cafe portion of the 3 different grants, that they would need to come back in February and ask for extension due to the items we previously discussed, such as roof issues and procurement of items, just operational needs for the space. They're aware of the deadline for that, so if they so choose to ask for an extension, they have the information.
Okay, but still no anticipated just because they don't have full information yet?
Correct. Okay. But we can follow up with them.
Okay.
See if they can provide that.
Okay. Do they live around here? I mean, they could come to the CRA meeting, give an update.
So Skylar's the main point of contact, and she's in Orlando. But if they asked for an extension, that is something that we would highly suggest they
Yeah.
appear for that.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions on that?
Well, all the scaffolding that's out there right now, is that trying to take care of the
Correct. Finish up
roofing
the
issues?
permitting.
Okay. All right, continue.
All right. So for the Scorpion Brewing Hall, this is the project where they were awarded the vacancy grant, $500,000. Post that award, that we could go into an agreement. We have no formal agreement with them. Post that, it was determined that the building would need to be demolished. With demolition of that building, the vacancy grant is not available. What you have to do is go into a vacant building and refurbish it open for business. What has been articulated to them is that we still would potentially go into an agreement with them for $500,000 post submission of an updated sources and uses of funds. How much funding do you have? How much is this project going to cost? And the last communication I had was in September that they would be providing that updated information within a week, and we haven't heard anything back. So as part of this discussion, we would like direction on, prior to our meeting later this month, where we're going to sit down and talk about all grants and how we're going to move forward. How long are we going to let these hang out there? And then are we going to put something in place, such as what we're going to talk about a little bit later, post-approval of going into an agreement, how much time do you have to get a building permit submitted? So those are some things that we kind of like some direction on. I have some ideas, but we'll talk about that a little bit more in depth later. But what we do need direction on specifically is Scorpion Hall. How long are we going to let this sit out there? And should we give them a timeline on, okay, we need updated information by this date, or, we're going to take those funds and allocate them to another line item. So I don't know
I
exactly.
think we're at a point where that's reasonable now.
Okay.
I mean, they're in our building, for heaven's sake, so
Right.
communication shouldn't be that difficult.
Sure.
But if we need to send a certified letter with a deadline of 2 to 4 weeks from now, I think that's reasonable. I don't know how you all feel.
I think so.
But I think we need to put funds back into the pot that can be used elsewhere if people are moving forward.
I agree.
Councilmember Shannon.
I'm just thinking if we're gonna do deadlines, that should be consistent, right? Because we have the Nolan, that's been, I don't know how many years. And then we have the what is it called, Nature's Patch or Food Patch? That's been as many years as well. So if we're gonna have deadlines and actually have sort of an algorithm, I just want it consistent with everyone.
In my talking points, I have a little bit more information for that. But yes, as part of the actual program description, that should be in there. Yes, of course, things are going to happen. There needs to be a process by which we can request amendments. But absolutely, I agree, there needs to be some deadlines in there.
Vice Mayor.
But I would say, again, if we have deadlines and people aren't meeting their deadlines, and then we say, okay, well, we're going to take that grant award away, not that they've even gotten a check written, but it's put back into the pot. If we don't have people lined up to apply for those grants, they're there, and those people can reapply when they get their stuff lined up and ready to go, correct? It's not like, once you apply once, if you don't fulfill the timelines, now you can't ever apply again, or you have some waiting period. It just means, right, it just means we take it off the ledger as being,
And the business renovation plan has been highly successful, and those funds have been allocated. So we would absolutely like to have funds that are not being used to be moved toward that, because other people do want to apply for those, for that grant. Any other questions on Scorpion Brewing? Thank you for the direction. So this is the second of three of the major ones I want to talk about. So the Immersive Museum at 703 Jones Street, that was approved $1 million through the vacancy reduction, the vacancy reduction grant. And unfortunately, there's been no movement forward at all. My last email that I sent was December 20th. It hasn't been responded to on where are you. And one of the major things that they have to do is they need to go through a level 2 process by which to ask for additional floor area for their proposed plan. And there's been no movement forward on any of that. I know one of their concerns was funding sources, but we haven't been provided any information on, and I requested, where are we? And so that's another one where, going back to what I said earlier, post-approval that we can go into an agreement, I think we need to have a timeline of when they have to submit for a building permit. My suggestion would be for, the vacancy reduction grant, 6 months with staff available or having the ability to provide a 3-month extension, but then build that into the actual program description of the grant so that they're just not hanging out there. But I do also want direction on this one or we want direction on this one on, should we give them a timeline on, we need this information back, or, we're not gonna go through with this grant.
I think that's reasonable. Are they communicating at least?
They're communicating, but it's, generally, it takes a bit of time, and it's, the communication is generally, we're gonna get started here. We're gonna get started after the new year, get things ramped up, but there's been no, evidence at all whatsoever of any movement forward.
Well, I mean, Scorpion, we talked about on May 17th of '21. This was May 16th of '22.
Correct.
But I would have expected some movement by now. And to me, it seems like the project isn't moving forward.
Correct. And when you're asking for this sum of money, I would expect just something. Here, we're looking into the parking issue. We're looking into that level 2 application, but there just hasn't been anything.
And they have not been reaching out to planning.
Not that I know of, no.
I see Ms. Clayton nodding her head. Councilmember Albritton, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, everything we do has a time element to it. I mean, development agreements have a time element. You pull a permit, it has a time element. And I think that's, not having it is odd to me.
Right.
Especially when we're offering money to somebody. I mean, we need to have commitments on that. So I think on everything we do, at least that's my opinion, we ought to be writing that in. Whatever we feel is good. I don't want to force anybody out quickly because I know there's a process to it, but 6 months,
Right. Well, there's the process once the building permit's been issued and the grant has physically been created and signed, then you have the 18 months, the certificate of occupancy with the ability to ask for an extension. But on the front end, that's my concern, especially for this larger, the vacancy grant. With the other grants, there hasn't been so much of an issue except for the Eat Green, which we'll go over a little bit later. But other than that, people generally, have moved forward with them. But I still, yes, I'd like to put a submission of building permit time.
And, the Nolan has been going on for so long, but I mean, they've had extenuating circumstances there.
Correct.
And there ought to be a process too, if something comes up like that there's also, a process where they come and they ask for an extension, on the timeline, so.
I think we just need more specific milestones along the entire path that they have to meet within certain deadlines.
Great. Thank you. So with the immersive museum, I'd like to reach out with them with a date certain of we need something back, or, we're gonna move these funds to another grant. I would say 30 days. Is that too short, or I'd like some direction on that?
So our next CRA meeting is going to be the 20th. Is that right, Ms. Cole?
20th.
That gives you, I beg your pardon?
The 20th of February?
Yeah. That gives you enough time to correspond
Right.
and give them 30 days before that next CRA meeting.
And then I can provide you an update of what they do
Right.
provide if they do. Fantastic, thank you.
For clarification, technically it's the 21st because the 20th is President's Day.
Okay.
Oh, that's right. Thank you.
Everyone comfortable with that?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on the immersive museum? So Eat Green Culture, this is the grant that we recently came before you to ask for the extension on. They asked for a year. We don't expect them to take a year. We were told that hopefully first quarter they'll be moving forward with getting the building permit and moving forward with that grant. Any questions on that? The Captain's Lounge, this is the one where the picture was mistaken again. I apologize for that. So it has been updated. They have beautiful signage, and it's expected they're going to be opening very soon, so that actually it is moving forward. And so some of these, and I do apologize that the CRA comments, since this was done a few months ago, were not exactly up to speed of where the process is right now. Any questions on the Captain's Lounge?
Questions?
All right. Then DeLuca's, they're moving forward, they have their permits, we're paying them out, so there's no issues with that grant.
I have
Now-
I have a question on
Yes.
Lucas. What are they going to be doing with that money? What,
The bulk of the grant was for their new roof.
oh, okay.
Yep. Any other questions on that? All right. And then Downtown Pizza, the same boat. The bulk of their grant was for air conditioning, but they moved forward with the building permit. We're paying them out. And then PJ's Auto World, I believe they're in the same, how are they saying, PJ's Auto World, they're still moving forward, correct?
The grant has been completed for the roof.
Okay, so that it's the same thing, they're moving forward and no issues with that one. And then also the same with the Travelers Inn. And then the last but not least would be the Nolan, which we've touched on. But again, just to recap, they have until March 1st to get their COs so that they can be awarded their final 10%, which again was part of their agreement. The 10% would be withheld until they did have CO, but we do expect that if they do want to obtain all the money for the cafe, that next month we would be coming forward with a grant extension request for that specific address. And then the only other thing I wanted to get some direction on was at this point, we really don't think the white box grant is necessary due to the business renovation grant, them both being very similar, but the business renovation grant is where you can receive up to $100,000, where the white box up to $50,000. So we would just like to terminate that grant and just remove that one.
Who's utilized it? Anyone?
We have people who have utilized it, but once the business renovation was approved, people that had been approved for white box but not had any funds expenditure, they want to terminate their white box and go forward with the business renovation, such as Papa John's on Missouri. So people are gravitating more toward the ability to have that $100,000 in funds instead of the $50,000.
Councilmember Albrecht.
Has Emily's applied for a white box grant?
They're working with Howard, but I don't believe the grant has been submitted yet.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I talked to Tony last week. I stopped by, and he is working with Howard.
What are they looking to renovate?
Until I see an application, I can't be exactly sure, but I just believe some interior improvements.
Interior improvements, mostly painting, bathroom, fix up, I think some benches on the inside, and I mean, I was kind of helping him with it a couple of months ago. I'm surprised he hadn't.
Well, he's been going through some issues as well.
Oh, yeah.
I provided some assistance on, they wanted to have some outdoor seating, and nothing really moved ahead. So, he, you know Tony, he's busy, and he's had his troubles, so things are a little slower than
Okay. Anything else? Everyone comfortable with terminating the white box grant? Do I have a motion to that effect?
Motion to terminate the white box grant?
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
And then my last point is that we would like to add for the vacancy grant that it's required that you have a sources and uses of funds submitted specific to the immersive museum. We'd really like to be able to review. They have this amount of funds. They just need the extra funds to move forward with the project. Now that we're approving the project, and then they're going out looking for funders. And so we would like to add that. Fantastic. That's the end of my presentation. Are there any other questions?
Anything else on 4.1? 4.2.
Recommend approval of Resolution 23-01 to the City Council that adopts the North Greenwood Community Redevelopment Area Plan.
Good afternoon, Jamie Lopko, Planning and Development. We're here today to finally discuss the North Greenwood Community Redevelopment Area Plan for review and recommendation to City Council. We're going to cover several major topics. I'm going to go through the first several very quickly. A lot of you have been involved in the process and are aware of what we've been through. But then the final three topics, I'm going to stop more frequently to ask questions to make sure everybody is on the same page with the bigger topics. So starting off, what is a CRA? It's a tool to direct revenue to a geographic area to address blight, infrastructure, vacancy, but it can also be used as a planning mechanism to develop people and place-based strategies to improve economics and housing in the area. So creating a CRA requires three things: adopting a finding of necessity, which we did back in August of 2020, and develop and adopt the CRA plan, which is what we're here to do, and then create a redevelopment trust fund, which will be before council at the work session today as well as on Thursday evening. This is the CRA boundary map that was adopted as part of the finding of necessity. With the boundaries, you have Stevenson Creek on the north, Jones on the south, the harbor on the west, and then Kings on the east. So with the study, we found several things, and that's what we're here to address in these strategies. Is we have fire, EMS, and police calls, as well as code violations that occur at a higher rate in the North Greenwood area versus the rest of the city of Clearwater. And a couple other things we identified was that there's a prevalence of poverty. Households spend more than 35% of their income on housing costs. The housing is in substandard conditions, and there's a lower median income and home values within the North Greenwood area. So some of the demographic information, we used the 2020 American Community Survey 5-year estimates because we didn't have access to all the 2020 census data when the report was done. So the only piece that comes from the 2020 census is the actual population of the area, which is 6,619 residents. A couple of data points I wanted to mention is the median income is $35,277, and the median home value is $219,000. We have 20% of households that live below poverty, and 48% of the housings are cost burden. Cost burden means that they spend more than 30% of their income on housing, which includes the rent, the mortgage, the utilities, and the association fees. The majority of the residents in the CRA work outside the CRA. However, 16% of those don't have a vehicle to get to and from work. And there's also a higher prevalence of chronic health conditions in the area versus the city, county, state, and nationally. This area has various parks, recreation facilities, community centers available to the residents, as well as cultural, community, and historic places within the community like our library, 3 schools, over a dozen churches, and several health centers. When it comes to zoning and use, it's predominantly a residential area. The map on this slide shows the public and semi-public-owned properties within the area. The city owns 64 properties, and those are the light blue areas. Pinellas County owns the several small parcels that are in pink, and Pinellas County has the large parcels in purple, which are the schools and the Curtis Museum. When it comes to environment and services, we've got the harbor in Stevenson Creek, which has the coastal high hazard, as well as the coastal storm areas and flood zones that impact the properties along those areas. And that can come with restrictions for the development. But we also have Stevenson Creek and wetlands that have habitat as well as vegetated areas to reduce flooding and support recreational activities. The street pattern is a grid. We have streets owned by the state, the city, the county, a couple privately owned streets. We have sidewalks along most of the roads, at least on one side, a few bike lanes, and the Pinellas Trail for biking and pedestrian movement. And PSTA does offer 3 routes within the area, as well as the Jolly Trolley to assist with transit within and to areas outside the CRA. And utilities and infrastructure is readily available throughout the CRA, with the exception of the unincorporated areas. We went forward with a public engagement campaign. Several things identified on the screen there, the efforts that we went to get public input. We also had a technical and steering committee that were formed to help guide the development of the plan. We gathered feedback during all of those sessions, and some of the broad topics were a desire for poverty reduction and economic and redevelopment opportunities, focusing higher intensity redevelopment opportunities in the Old Bay District, focus on MLK Corridor as the center of the community, consider programs for the renovation and rehabilitation of existing homes, increase connections throughout the community, and that's for the Pinellas Trail and Stevenson Creek, increased access to public facilities like Walter C. Campbell and recreation fields after school and on weekends, a need for a coordination among existing nonprofits to better meet the needs of the community. And all of this was used to draft the vision for the plan, which is the North Greenwood will flourish as a vibrant community where social and economic equity is prioritized to eliminate poverty and enhance the quality of life for all. The success of North Greenwood will be achieved through people-based solutions, academic excellence, the improvement of existing infrastructure, and the creation of new spaces that will foster a thriving and sustainable future. Building off that vision and public engagement, staff developed a plan that contains 5 chapters and 5 appendices. Now that is all of the background information. I just wanted to pause briefly to see if there's any questions on that piece of it.
Any questions at this time? Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I just have just a couple on a couple of the pages. On the page about existing conditions, we have the public and semi-public owned property. The city owns 64 parcels in the CRA. I was just wondering about how many are zoned, you can get this to me at a later day, but about how many are zoned for residential and how many are zoned for, business and.
Okay.
And then the other thing was, I was struck by your statement that there are some privately owned streets. What's a privately owned street?
It's more likely a driveway than
Okay.
it is an actual street, but there are, I want to say 2 or 3 that are within the area.
Okay. And then the last thing is on the engagement response. I'm just struck just a little bit about, we've got poverty reduction, higher intensity opportunities, but it's got for housing, which I think is, a huge challenge nationwide, here in Clearwater, in the county. We've got rehabilitation of existing single-family homes. So there's not a bullet here about increasing housing options. It's rehab. So are we not going to focus on, or this was just the engagement response?
That was the highlights of the engagement response. There is a need identified, and there are strategies to develop new housing, but the focus of that would be more infill and small scale.
Okay, great. Well, and when we talk about, I know what infill is, but when we talk about small scale, does that include thinking outside the box, like ADUs, testing ADUs in certain
Yes, ma'am.
streets and areas? Okay, great. Thank you.
Other questions? I have questions when we get to the council side of this. I guess we could ask some of them now, but I think I'm going to hold mine till then.
Well, that was up to the plan implementation,
Right.
right? Okay, because I have a
Some
couple more.
governance issues, I've got
After
some
that, yeah.
questions. So,
So this comes later? The next part of the PowerPoint comes in the
Yeah.
council meeting, or it's coming now?
I was going to do all of it.
Okay, good.
okay, there's some different things, though, that aren't in both.
The plan should be in both. The trust fund should only be for city council.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Plan implementation, we're going to cover the TIF projections, your tax increment financing, the funding recommendations, our emphasis area recommendations, and then the actual CRA implementation table that's in the plan. All right, so our TIF projections, as part of the TIF projections, we have to create the trust fund for the tax revenue collected in the 20-year planning period. So these projections are based on the city and county millage rates with no special districts. And if there are any changes to that, then the TIF will obviously be changed because of that. And if approved, the city and county will contribute up to 95% of the property tax increment. So any of the increment above the 2022 tax rates would be the increment that will be set aside for the CRA. But that is caveated that we have to commit 50% of our total TIF increment to the 3 county priority areas. and we'll get into those into the next section. So right now in your plan, the TIF projections are based on 2021 property tax values, since we did not have the 2022 values at that point. However, it is the intent to use the 2022 property tax values, so the numbers you have may adjust slightly because of that. So in order to project the total TIF, we took the total property value of the area. We set a standard growth rate of 3%, which is typical for the CRAs. And then we included an anticipated value increase of approximately $100 million for possible development in the Old Bay District. And that's broken up over years 6 through 12. And based on that, we are projecting that the TIF will generate $28.6 million over the 20-year planning period. But keep in mind that this TIF revenue will be restricted on how it can be spent and is focused more on physical strategies, capital improvement projects. And we'll go over that in detail in the CRA. But I did want to note that since we went to the Community Development Board, we did receive some comments from the county. And one of those was the original millage rate that we had in the plan was incorrect. It was reduced. So if you recall, there was $30.3 million originally set aside when it went to Community Development Board. And now it's down to 28.6 based on that change in the millage rate. Is there any questions on the TIF projections? All right. So I mentioned earlier the county priority areas where we have to spend 50% in order to get the 95% increments. Those categories are affordable housing, economic development and employment, and mobility. So TIF dollars are going to be more place-based. So under affordable housing, we're going to focus on small-scale infill development and renovation and rehab of existing homes. It's not the intent to create any large apartment complexes or anything like that within the community. It wasn't the desire of what the community wanted. They wanted to keep it small-scale, duplexes, quadruplexes, ADUs, things like that. Under economic development, we're going to focus on attracting new businesses to increase employment opportunities within the CRA. Under mobility, we're going to focus on improving walking and biking infrastructure to make sure we're connecting the community as well as improving access to transit. And then, of course, a portion of the funds are going to be used to cover the administration of the CRA over the 20-year period. Next is our second set of funding is your American Rescue Plan Act funds. So since the TIF accrual was going to take several years before we get a substantial amount of money, I think we started out with $60,000 in the first year. We set aside $5 million in ARPA funds that can be used right away. So these funds are focused more on people-based strategies, since the TIF funds will not be able to use those. You can see by the table on the screen, we focused a lot of the funds on poverty reduction because a lot of that is going to be people-based initiatives that the TIF's not going to be able to cover. And we'll go through the specifics of those in the CRA implementation table. But basically, the ARPA funds have to be allocated by 2024 and spent by 2026. So those are the more immediate needs that we want to make sure that we're using the ARPA funds for. Emphasis area recommendations. This was required as part of the CRA that we have a diagrammatic plan. So we did an exercise during one of the workshops to identify paths, edges, nodes, districts, and landmarks in the North Greenwood area to kind of give us an idea of what the community felt was important in the area. And so you can see by the plan that we identified several areas where we could have land use changes, design changes, or redevelopment opportunities. Some of the areas will not have as many opportunities, but others will have multiple, and I wanted to highlight a couple of those. We have Area A, which is our North Ward School and Seminole Boat Ramp. This area will have opportunities related to the reuse of the North Ward School, additional recreation amenities, and a connection to Clearwater Harbor. Area B's North Fort Harrison and North Myrtle corridors. These are major commercial corridors that run through the area, and will focus on possible land use and design standard changes to catalyze redevelopment of properties with commercial, residential, and mixed-use opportunities. Then Area E is the North Morton North King corridor, which is identified as the historic center of North Greenwood. And so the focus on this will be redevelopment and revitalization, as well as possible infill development. In addition, the city has received a grant from Forward Pinellas, which we will hopefully start in February, working with them to do a design charrette with a couple of the properties along Martin Luther King to figure out what the community wants to see in that area. What kind of land use changes, design standards do we need to change within our current codes to accommodate revitalizing that corridor? And I'll pause there before we get into the implementation table, because that's the next piece, and that's where all the strategies are.
Questions on that? I'd like to go back to the ARPA real quick.
Sure.
How were those denominations chosen within the 6 category or 7 categories?
Actually, in table 14, I believe, and 15, that's where the actual money was set aside. We went through, and when we developed the strategies, we categorized them. Okay, that one was public safety, that one was mobility. And then when we looked at those and we tried to set aside a certain amount of funding that we felt was reasonable based on talking to city staff to accomplish that strategy, whether it was $25,000 or $100,000, we then added those up to make sure that we had $5 million set aside, or if we went over, we had to adjust some of the funding sources.
Okay. Continue.
So
Vice
that,
Mayor.
I had the same question. I mean, I asked for, share some descriptors, which I know is in this great big one that we got, Friday, or whatever. But, so that's spelled out. You're gonna share with us what some of those are?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic.
Keeping in mind that within this plan, the only funding source that is really set in stone with this is your TIF dollars. If we want to shift ARPA dollars from one category to another, the plan is not going to set that in stone. That's something that we can definitely do. Okay, oops. The CRA implementation table is really the backbone of the plan, and that's where all of our strategies are, and all the important information. So I'm going to go through that category by category briefly and see if there's any questions on the specific strategies that we've identified. Did we miss something? Do you agree or disagree with something? Just to make sure that, because this is going to be the things that our CRA staff is going to be looking at the implementation of. And so, just to reiterate, the funding source table was done based on the best knowledge that we had at the time. And TIF is going to be the only thing that's going to be set in stone by this between our agreement between the city and the county. So if we feel like we have ARPA out there, general funds, CIP funds, there's other funds out there, if we feel like we need to modify that or adjust that, we can do that. And some of these projects and strategies are things that we've already discussed and may already be within our CIP, or something that departments are already doing, and we're just looking at continuing them, but also we wanted to make sure that this plan was all-encompassing. We weren't just picking only the TIF projects that in the plan. We wanted to make sure the community understood that we heard them, and that we wanted to identify everything that the city is currently doing and could be doing, and they wanted us to do. So that's why it has a substantial amount of strategies within it beyond what the TIF has. All right, so the first subjects are going to be our capital improvement projects. We have 9 projects in the table. They include improvements in connections and placemaking opportunities on our sidewalks and along the Pinellas Trail. We have a redesign of North Harrison Avenue to encourage active transportation, and park improvements at the Shuffleboard and Lawn Bowling Complex, as well as Overbrook and North Betty Lane parks. That's the CIP things that we have for this area. And are there any questions or comments on that piece of it?
Any questions?
I had a question about well, first of all, a lot of these, just philosophically, need to be taken care of by the city anyway, right? Whether we have a CRA or not. Provide programs for blighted properties and police, fire, and medical education for residents and things like that. Improve bicycle and pedestrian safety. Under poverty reduction, I found improve MLK corridor. I mean, what does that mean? Aesthetics or safety? I mean, how does improving the MLK corridor?
I think that goes to the commercial.
Is it about the commercial and businesses there?
Yes.
Okay, I would think so. And then I don't have a real comprehension of what provide one-time emergency assistance is there.
If we felt there was a need from, I believe it's a low-income household, that would prevent them from getting to work. They had a car broke down, they got a flat tire, something like that. That's a one-time thing that we could assist them with, and that would, of course, be tracked to make sure that it was only a one-time thing. We're just making sure that if we can give somebody one assist to make sure they can get to work or get their kid to school, then we want to be able to do that.
Okay, and that would be the CRA department that would handle all those? Okay, good.
Councilmember Tejeda.
I just want to expand on that, and just to be specific. The one-time emergency assistance is specific to private citizens, not nonprofits or businesses, or
Yes.
it's a private person.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Councilmember Albritton.
Yeah, I think in my view, the biggest plus for this is the rebuilding of the MLK corridor, commercial corridor, because that's, we had most complaints about, why can't the city do something? And that's really got to be that's something that we can help now a little bit to bring the market back into that area. Because at one time, I mean, they had a healthy commercial area there, and I'd like to see that built up again.
Yes, sir.
And I think by including in some of the other areas into this, bringing the money into it, that will happen.
Continue.
As we kind of jumped into some of the other strategies, do you want me to go through each one of them or just open it up for all of the strategies?
Well, let's go through them and see
Okay.
if there's questions.
All right. The next one is we're moving into the goals. First one's public safety. It has 12 strategies, and there are several that are going to build on our relationships with the community between the police department and fire department through education, mentoring, and training programs. Other strategies are developing a grant program to assist with interior and exterior improvements to blighted properties, continuing to organize cleanup days in the community, and installing additional lighting along the sidewalks and trails.
Okay, any questions on this?
Okay, mobility is next. We have 5 strategies there, which include opportunities to increase or expand our transit service, on-street parking study, additional shade and amenities along sidewalks and trails, and solutions to improve bicycle and pedestrian safety, including exploration of a Safe Routes to School program.
And then we've already covered the poverty reduction, so
Okay.
next.
Housing affordability, there are 8 strategies there, providing rental assistance to cost-burdened households to prevent displacement, provide financial assistance to low-income residents for improvements to their home for life safety issues or to accommodate physical disabilities, create programs to support and educate residents on home ownership, and create a grant program to incentivize the construction of affordable housing on vacant or infill lots.
Vice Mayor.
I don't see too much there that's different than what we already do, I mean, again, I know affordable housing is a huge challenge, but I just see it as kind of the same, what we're doing. And what we're doing isn't, we still have a crisis. We still have people who are in need. So hopefully we can continue to broaden opportunities for more housing for people who live in the city or want to live in the city.
Well, I think one of the differences, though, is going to be the resources through the TIF and through the ARPA funds.
Yeah, but I mean, how much money was allocated for that? That's not going to go far. What was it, 450,000 housing affordability?
That's only in the ARPA funds.
Okay,
A
yeah.
very large chunk of the TIF funds is for
Yeah,
housing.
yeah. Okay.
Okay. Quality of life covers 10 strategies, including programming for after-school and summer activities, both from a public and private organization perspective, addressing child poverty through assistance for low-income households to ensure adequate access to food, technology, and transportation, work with partners to provide job readiness for the youth as well as workforce development, support increased child care and childhood education, and support organizations that provide youth mental health and wellness programs.
Any questions? Councilmember Shea.
I just want to make a comment. I'm actually very, very happy that that is included, because in that community, they actually have a higher rate of youth versus others. So to have that as a focus, I really appreciate that. I wish it was even more, because they are the future. So I like that you've included that specifically.
Okay.
All right, we'll move on to governance. This chapter covers a lot of the requirements for auditing and reporting from both the CRA trustees and city council. The thing that I wanted to make sure we spend a little bit of time on here is the county has requested that the city include a citizens advisory committee as part of the CRA, and their job will be to make recommendations to the CRA trustees on how to plan and execute the goals and strategies of this plan. So at this point, we've proposed a 5-member committee, and the community was really wanted to try to have a hybrid approach of how those members were appointed, to where we would have 3 of those elected by the community and 2 appointed by city council. And then members on the committee would receive a stipend for their time and service on the community, and the details of how that community would function and when they would meet or how often and term limits, that would be something that would be determined by CRA staff and the trustees in creating the committee and its bylaws. The one thing I will note is also, again, since we've had the CDB meeting, we've gotten comments from Pinellas County staff, and they would like to see the advisory committee's membership increased to 7 members, where all are elected. They think that the hybrid approach or the election approach is going to be very cumbersome and time-consuming, and they would also like to have 2 of those members appointed by the Board of County Commissioners.
They want them all elected, but they want to appoint 2 of them.
Oh, no, they want them all appointed. They want them all appointed, I'm sorry, I misspoke.
Okay.
Oh,
They want them all appointed because they thought the
No
election
election?
process was too long.
Oh,
okay.
and they'd all be appointed by the Board of County Commissioners?
No, they would have 2. and
They would
the
have 2 and the
city
city
council
council would
5
have
for
5?
us, 2.
All right,
Okay.
that makes sense. That makes
I
more
was
sense.
going to ask how the elections would work. I mean, are we literally talking about supervisor of elections?
It's similar to what we do for the Downtown Development Board. The CRA staff would run the election.
Okay. And then has the stipend been determined?
No, sir.
Is that how the South St. Pete CRA has been established? Do you know?
South St. Pete is based on appointment, and the Board of County Commissioners do have a seat on that. 3, I think 6 are appointed by the city and 3 are county.
Have there been any lessons learned from that CRA?
Not that I'm aware of, but I can look into that.
That's something I'm very interested in, because I know they really, it took a while for them to get going. I think with the ARPA funds that we've set aside, we've kind of primed the pump. And there's also some development going on, obviously, up along the waterfront. But I just want to make sure that or if there's any lessons learned, up in Baltimore that you could add. Jay, I'd be curious.
I will definitely get back to you, collaborate with Jamie as well, and get that back to you ASAP.
Because this CRA is different from our downtown CRA, which is much more business-oriented. This is more resident-focused.
There is a project that is very resident-focused that I can compare it to, and I can pull some best practices from. So I will take the time to parallel those, put them together, and get them back to you.
When do we need to make the decision about the makeup and process of the Citizens Advisory Committee?
The actual committee and its bylaws and the stipend can be done later. At this point, we do need to create the membership of the committee, if it's going to be 5 or if it's going to be 7, if they're all going to be elected, if they're going to have a hybrid, if they're all going to be appointed. We kind of need to have that set. Because
7 seems reasonable to me, I don't know.
Yeah. And I think the appointed is a lot simpler than the elected process.
Councilmember Shea.
So I realize that the DDB is going to be different than this one, but there are things that that we should learn from. The actual voters that come out and vote for the DDB is really low, and so I want to learn from that. And one of the concerns I have about this particular advisory board is that the votes are going to be per parcel owner, and with a community with 65% renters, I want to know how much of the community is going to actually vote. And so I think that's going to be a difficult process. I'm not sure what the solution is, but it's something to consider. With 65% being renters and the voters being parcel owners, it's just an added challenge.
But the county's recommending against even having the elections. Mr. Margolis?
I was just going to say that these are pretty important decisions to make, kind of on the fly, to be perfectly candid. The redevelopment plan itself says that it's going to be a five-member advisory board, 3 of which are going to be elected by the voters of the area and the other 2 appointed by the city council. If we're talking about substantially changing that, whether it's the county's request or not, that's a big conversation that needs to be had. That's not something that I would recommend just approving and saying we'll fix that later, change it later. As pointed out, there are questions about how the election process will work, who would manage it, who's eligible, what kind of voters are there, does the county control all of this? These are major decisions to make, and I would recommend that we take a little bit of time to think about that and perhaps speak with either a county staff or county elected officials to get a better sense of what works for everyone, as well as talking to the community. That's not something I would just pass through without thinking about.
Vice Mayor.
I'd be worried too a little bit about absent landlords. So homeowners that are there that are renting them out, maybe they're slumlords, and they come in and they're the ones who get to vote, not the people who are actually living here. And so I think there can be a lot of nuance. I just want to be aware of that and verification of all that stuff. You know, that's time, and who does that? Do the supervisor of elections do that? And then the other thing, it was just a other question about the well, first of all, things about term limits, and are there going to be staggered term limits for some kind of continuity? But the stipend, where does that come out of? The TIF funds, or?
That's another, I mean, the redevelopment plan does not specify any sort of stipends, so if that's something that the county is recommending. Candidly, I don't know where that came from, or who's paying for that, or how much it would be, and why they get a stipend when no other advisory committee does.
Right.
Those are all, in my opinion, important questions that
Right.
should be discussed.
I would think it would at least have to come out of the CRA. I wouldn't expect it to come out of the general
General
fund.
funds.
I don't think that that would be well received.
So if this is a stumble here, like we're not clear about this part, does that mean the whole approval of the plan is delayed a little bit?
Well, the next step beyond the approval, if it would go forward on Thursday evening and you recommended approval, would be for it to go on to the Board of County Commissioners for their approval. So we kind of need to have something concrete from the city before we can send that on. Although we do have a slight time crunch, we've got a little bit of extra time built in to where we've got a little bit of time if we need to push off a final decision on this to February 2nd, because the trust fund itself needs 2 readings, and so it will be on your February 2nd agenda for second reading.
And it doesn't have to go back to the CDB at all if we make changes?
I do not believe we'll go back to CDB, however, ultimately the county does have the say-so, and they do give the final sign-off one way or the other, so we definitely have to collaborate with them to make sure that we have both a governance structure as well as other aspects of the plan that do work for the county. So it's definitely, it's always a challenge anytime you have either intergovernmental partnerships or external stakeholders, because you have a lot of cooks in the kitchen oftentimes, but each of the cooks here are pretty important. So I think that's a discussion that council needs to have, not only amongst yourselves, but also with counterparts of the county as well.
But if the CRA trustees approve this today, to pass it on to us 15 minutes from now, which is a little weird, then we can make alterations either before Thursday, or postpone a meeting?
Yes, those would be the options.
Because the CRA isn't going to meet again, as we talked about earlier, until the 21st.
Actually, the 13th, I'm sorry, I apologize. 13th is their next scheduled. I looked on the calendar.
Okay.
So that would mean approve today at this meeting, and then scramble between now and Thursday to get this part cleared up?
It's up to the council, but the CRA, but the action item that's before you is to approve a redevelopment plan. That redevelopment plan is materially different than the presentation that we are seeing right now. This governance structure is not what is articulated in the redevelopment plan. I'm not suggesting it's anyone's fault. That process, we get that feedback ongoing, especially from the county, but I'm not sure what it would mean for the CRA to approve the plan right now when there is a material difference between what's in the plan versus what is on that presentation.
Okay. And keeping in mind what the county wants to see or has recommended.
Or they're changing views on what it may be.
Right.
Just like I said, I know we get feedback ongoing from the county, and so I don't think it's necessarily on our fault, or anything that happened on our end of it, but it's just a conversation that continues, and unfortunately, some of that information, I think, came into the county, from the county side relatively late in the process.
Ms. Clayton?
Thank you, Gina Clayton, Planning and Development. Would it be possible, if you're not comfortable with the vote and you would like it to be an appointment, isn't it possible you could just make a recommendation to city council to approve the plan with that change? And then we could change the paragraph or two that deals with it in the plan before Thursday night, and you could approve it with the amendment.
I think that would be fine. I mean, to the vice mayor's point, we would be scrambling a little bit, but to the mayor's point also, for purposes of at least passing this item, yes, you can do that, but I do think that it is odd to be passing an item that has internal inconsistencies in it, but if we acknowledge that that's something that has to be cleaned up, and if, to Ms. Clayton's suggestion, if the CRA passes it with the recommendation to the council, which sounds silly, as the mayor pointed out, but if the CRA passes it with the recommendation to
Make that change.
or to, take further action when it comes to the governance structure, that would be permissible, and that's probably the cleanest way for minutes purposes, because at least that way it's reflected in the minutes that the CRA was aware of the issue and is taking action to evaluate that issue.
Well, we still haven't answered to the stipend, where it comes from. And we haven't, do we need to articulate the staggering or the format of,
That's something that can be created in the bylaws, and if
Okay.
it's more comfortable, we can remove the stipend, and it can be addressed when the committee is created.
that's probably safer to have it addressed when it's created, because we don't know where, I'd like to know where money's coming from if we say we're going to have a stipend. From where?
Well, I think it's going to have to come from the CRA.
I thought that it would come
Initially,
from
the
the
ARPA
CRA
funds.
Administration.
Yeah.
where we thought it would come from. I do want to say we have representatives from the Urban Leadership Coalition who may have some perspectives too on the committee.
I'm going to open it up to the public anyway, once you're done.
Yes, and just to clarify, the presentation as well as the plan are consistent. They both recommend a 5-member committee with 3 elected and 2 appointed. The only change is we've gotten comments from the county requesting us to go to a 7-member and adding 2 more additional members for them to appoint. But the first 5 would still be your discretion as to whether we want to do the hybrid approach or all appointed.
If I could just ask, just because we're on the
Yes.
topic, I don't know, where did the stipend come from? Was that something the county is recommending? Is it
Yeah.
something the community is asking for? Where did it come from?
It was more a discussion between staff because the members of this community are poverty-stricken and they're already cost burdened. In order for them to serve on this community, we didn't want to see them to see that as a detriment, that we're taking away from their household and their family and their work. The way to earn money, they're having to give their time to the board. So we didn't want it to be a deterrent that they would have to be losing something for that. So we felt a small stipend would offset their ability to serve.
I don't see any legal problem with that. However, nothing is as simple as it should be sometimes. And, a couple of things I do want to point out. One, as far as stipends, we don't do that currently for our other advisory boards. As the mayor pointed out, yes, we can pay for it out of CRA as administrative costs. I don't see any legal problem with that. However, it gets complicated when you start dealing with tax issues, benefits, things like that, because are they going to be 1099? Are they going to be contractors? Are they going to be employees of the CRA? You start to run some employment and tax type questions. I think we can work through it if that's the direction the CRA would like to go through, would like to have them have a stipend, but there is just a little bit more thought, I think, that needs to be put into that, not to mention, of course, setting the amount, which would be in the CRA's discretion. So just things to think about and just talk through as we work through that conversation.
And that's not something that has to be in the plan right now. We can hold that discussion till when we create the committee.
Also, I think it was intentionally, vague or left some room for when this board is established or this advisory committee is established, as well as the bylaws. I can say, as it relates to composing the advisory committee, when I did hear about the 5 members, I thought, okay, that's fine. Also, the hybrid approach, I personally thought that that was a good strategy or a good way to approach it, with the 3 members being elected and then 2 members being appointed by the council, which essentially, of course, is the CRA trustee board. So I thought that was great. Hearing about the 2 additional people or members is a little new to me as well. So I definitely think I agree it needs to be talked about or discussed more, but I really did like and recommend the hybrid approach.
Go ahead and finish. And then, we'll have some discussion.
2 more sections to cover. Our appendices. Appendix A is a legal description, it's a requirement of the plan. It was based on the map that was adopted as part of the finding necessity study. Appendix B is the CRA local assessment. That's the 12 factors that we use to determine at what level the TIF funding would be at. And so our consultant VHB determined that we had scored 78 points, which would determine it an urban revitalization area, making it eligible for 95% of the tax increment. The county will again redo this assessment, and we're hoping that the numbers stay relatively the same and we still qualify for the same amount. Appendix C, again, is a tax increment projection table. That is a brand new table from what the Community Development Board saw because of the change in millage. This is a year-over-year projection with a 3% standard increase. And then to accommodate the possible $100 million in Old Bay, you'll see between years 6 and 12, that number will fluctuate between 3% and 9.5%. And then, so again, the total TIF revenue goes from 30.3 down to 28.6 based on the change in the millage. Appendix D is a neighborhood impact assessment, which again is required for the CRA plan. It looks at 6 elements: relocation, traffic circulation, environmental quality, availability of community facilities and services, effect on school population, and other items affecting the physical and social quality of the neighborhood. Based on our assessment, we found the plan that there be no detriment of any of those listed. Appendix E, that is a brand new appendix that was not included as part of the Community Development Board packet. This was a direct result of comments from the county staff. And it's basically 2 items. The first thing is a narrative in the beginning of it that covers how our projects and strategies address the items that were identified in the finding necessity study, and also notes that the city will not incur debt as part of the CRA. The second piece is we took our tables 14 and 15 that are in there that have all of the strategies and the funding sources, and we created new tables for 10 years. And basically the county wanted to see only the projects that have TIF funding. So all of the strategies are on there, but you'll see that only the ones that are actually TIF funded will either have a dollar amount or CRA staff under the years. So they wanted to make sure that we weren't spending more than we were collecting. So if we have $60,000 the first year, we wanted to make sure in that line item of 2023 that we didn't have more than $60,000 allocated. So we have all of the TIF projects identified in there, funding year over year if they're going to have funding allocated for the first 10 years. And then the third thing is the county wanted to make sure we specifically identified which of the TIF projects were county TIF funded. So those are in light blue that identify the county TIF eligible projects. And then the last thing is our timeline of approval, which right now we're here before the CRA board for your recommendation and hopefully to city council work session. And then on the 12th, we would technically have first reading of the trust fund ordinance and the plan adoption. And February 2nd would be second reading of the ordinance. And if that all goes as planned on February 2nd, we would then pass it on the Board of County Commissioners for their review in April or May of 2023. And that's it.
Other questions at this time? Vice Mayor?
If we have to have further discussions about the governance, just to make sure it's clean and people feel comfortable, does that mean that last bullet of April or May of 2023, the final approval might be a May or June? Would it only be kind of like a 1-month delay? Or, I don't know, the Board of County Commissioners, do they take a large break in June or July or anything?
No, and I don't anticipate that it would change because we still have the February 2nd meeting to bring the CRA plan back to you. So the trust fund will take 2 readings. We're not sending anything to the county until after February 2nd anyway. So if we need more time and you don't want to approve something on January 12th, we do have time built in there to where we could make some changes to the plan and bring it back to you on the 2nd.
Okay.
Anyone from the public? Ms. Clayton?
Sorry, I just want to be very clear, though. If the plan is not approved by May by the Board of County Commissioners, the TIF will not go into effect until another year. So we are in a tight time frame to make sure we hit all these marks.
Got it.
Anyone from the public like to speak to this item?
Good evening.
Afternoon.
Gloria Campbell, Thank you, Jamie. Great job. I did want to speak to the one item that seemed to be the real hanger here, is related to the CAC is what they call it in St. Pete. I'm not sure what we'll end up calling it here. Couple of things. First of all, we spent a lot of time talking about this at the steering committee meeting. We did not ask for a stipend, and if that is an issue, I'd say take the stipend out. The reason the stipend was put in there was because of the elections. And we were told that if we do the elections, there are costs involved. And so the reason for the stipend was to cover some of those costs, not for poor people needing to have additional funding. So I want to straighten that out. Second of all...
Do you mean so somebody could actually campaign?
Yes. So from what we understand, and this was based on, I guess that's what happens in the downtown CRA, that there are elections and that there are costs associated with running for one of those.
DDB.
Yeah, okay. So that was what the money was put, that was what we were told, that would be one way to handle that. Just some lessons learned. First of all, 5 members, it's going to be hard to get 5 people, period. And now you're talking about 7. I think that if you look at most of the boards, especially advisory boards, that there are, there's difficulty. They've had difficulty in St. Pete. I think they have a 7 or 9-member board. They cannot fill the seats. There are always empty seats. So the bigger the board, the more problem you're going to have in getting people to serve on those boards. I think 5 is perfect, whether they're all elected or they're all appointed. I think it's an easy one, and if the county has to do 2 and the city does 3, that's fine. But I think anytime you add another 2 or 4 people, you're going to run into issues. The other difference is that, as we know, in St. Pete, you have a strong form of government. So the CAC basically is just that. It's an advisory committee. The reason people don't want to serve is because they advise and then they get ignored. So how that governance and how you put all that together, I think is probably, and what authority that the advisory board will actually have is more important than who's going to sit on there and whether you're going to give them a stipend. So that's it for me.
Thank you,
Any
Ms.
questions?
Campbell. Any questions? Can you fill out a comment card?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I want to keep Ms. Call happy.
I think you make a great point in, first of all, it is a challenge to get people to serve on advisory boards, and making it convenient for time and location for them to serve is important. But I also think, as you mentioned, being listened to is a big factor in serving. If you feel that your voice is honored and respected and listened to, and you've done your homework and you're coming prepared, then the system works. And I think, I think we see that, like with our Environmental Advisory Board. Doing homework, coming prepared, asking, listening to, and things move the needle. And that's a big part of it.
Anyone else for citizens?
I would like at some point to clarify the comments about the DDB, so everyone can understand how the DDB works, because I don't quite understand the correlation between the stipend and the elections. So I would like maybe Mr. Margolis explain. For the DDB, there's elections, and I guess the costs are it's from this administrative side. But I don't think the people who are elected or people who are running get reimbursed, or if there's any cost to it. So I just want that clarified so everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, not that I know.
Plus, if we did the stipend, it would only go to the people who won.
Right.
So
And you need the money before the election
that
to actually run.
kind of comes in handy.
Yeah.
So
I also like to point out that on the DDB, there's one board member who actually handles close to 60 votes. So these elections are a little wacky. They're not like your typical elections. They get the approval, hey, you just vote for me.
Because it's associated with a parcel rather than an individual person. So if you own a lot of property or a property that's already divided, you get that many votes. If you're renting to someone, then there's a lot of manipulating in that way because it's not per person, but per parcel. And that's why the election process to me is not accurate in this circumstance.
Would that be the same situation with this?
That's my concern.
That's the decision that the council and the county are going to have to make. Because on one hand, I mean, there is a lot of precedent for that per parcel ownership controlling votes. It's not only done that way in the DDB, but it's done that way in community development districts and other, special purpose government entities. However, when you're talking about a CRA like this one that is resident focused, there is a strong argument to be made that it should really be per resident rather than per parcel owner, but that is a policy decision for the CRA to make. I don't see any legal requirement or legal restriction one way or the other.
I think I'm leaning towards appointment with 5 members, and we'll give the county their 2 and us the 3. Councilmember Albritton, you had a comment?
Well, I was just going to say, there's really not a lot of campaigning in the DDB. I mean, I ran a couple of times, and all I did, and I think I expended more money than anybody because I just sent everybody a letter. That was it. I mean, and it was nothing. But it's not the same, and I kind of lean the same way. I think an appointment is a lot cleaner. I think it does the same thing, and I think people will be happier that way.
Councilmember Che.
To give an example, let's say someone owns two duplexes. That owner gets 4 votes, and none of the renters do. So that needs to be considered, especially when 65% of this community are renters. So I'm leaning towards appointment as well.
I question how the county is going to know the 2 that they want to appoint, but we'll see. Anything else on this? Do I have a motion? Do you want to make decisions, or do you want to just approve it and send it on to the council? And we can make changes at that level.
We actually need a recommendation from the CRA.
No, I understand that.
Okay, sorry.
So like
But we can make the changes right now.
Or you can make my work session.
Right. What's your pleasure? I can't make a motion.
So you think we could make a motion to approve it and change the governance to 3 appointed by the county, 2 appointed by...
3 by the city,
3
2
by the
by the
city,
county.
2 by the county, and no stipend, with staggering terms to be figured out when they develop their charter or their rules or whatever, something like that?
Yes.
Mr. Margolis?
I think that's okay, yeah.
Is that a motion?
So moved.
Is that clear enough for the...
As long as it's clear to the clerk.
Okay,
I thought so.
okay.
So I've got a motion and a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Anything on directors' reports?
Absolutely. So thank you again for the opportunity to serve in this capacity. I know that we have had change, and I just want to say that I've always said change is the only constant, and I'm still very enthusiastic and happy to be here and move forward officially with my first CRA meeting. I would like to say that the Business Observer published an article December 26th, and they quoted the headline, 2023 could be the year that downtown Clearwater begins long-awaited transformation. And I personally could not agree more, particularly now, not just downtown Clearwater, but also 2023 is the year that North Greenwood begins long-awaited transformation as well. Last Thursday marked 1 month for me being in my role, and I began literally December 5th with my first Christmas party or holiday party being the same date. And so in that, I would like to call Vicki Shire, our special events coordinator, to give a recap of the holiday extravaganza.
Good afternoon, Vicki Shire, CRA Special Events Coordinator. I'm here to present a PowerPoint and recap all the wonderful program we had in downtown Clearwater for our community. So for our first slideshow, I would like just to show a list of the events we had and the community partnerships. Most important, I'm impressed with all the community partnerships. Without their help and stuff, it would not have been possible. So I just want to thank all our partnerships that came out to this holiday extravaganza to make this holiday season great for the community. So, look at that, and it's just going to grow. So I guarantee next year, I can actually tell you right now, we're in the process of meeting and collaborating with other partnerships for next year already. So we're already in the move. So the next slideshow I want to show you is our tree lighting. Thank you guys for all coming out. You guys are all there. Hopefully you guys enjoyed yourselves. Did anybody get to play in the snow? Okay. So for our tree lighting ceremony, we had, of course, Mother Nature was not cooperating at first, but then eventually she decided to let us have some fun. As you can see, we had some wonderful performers this year. We had stilt walkers, we had characters, we had vendors, giveaways, and the most important thing I think you can all agree on was the snow. Mr. and Mrs. Claus was there too, of course, but the biggest attraction was the snow. I even saw some parents in there having fun as well too with their kids. So it was a great turnout. I'd say we'd have over about 1,000 people there. I could be wrong, but I was moving and shaking that day, but I'm gonna say we probably had over about 1,000 people there. So thank you again for attending and coming out and having some fun with us. The second one was the Holiday Spirit Lights Festival. As you can see, lots of fun again. This was to help promote the community to come down during the evening to see all the lights, the decorations, and of course our local businesses, so they could come down, stroll with their families each night, and enjoy the atmosphere of just all the beautiful lights and decorations we had this year. So as you can tell, we had glow-in-the-dark putt-putt, which was a big success. We had our train rides, we had bounce houses, again, silt walkers, and Mr. and Mrs. Claus, and then of course our characters. So once again, the biggest takeaway, honestly, from all our events this year is we had families come down that have never been here before in downtown Clearwater and said they were so grateful for the events and that they would return. So that was a great takeaway for our team, that they were very excited about seeing more of the programs that we're going to have in downtown Clearwater, and they definitely will return. Last but not least, of course, we have to have something for our four-legged friends. So we had Home for the Holidays Paws on Parade, and I'd like to thank Tiny Paws at this time. They're the ones who produced the event. And I'm happy to say that we had over 100 dogs registered. We had 6 shelters and rescues there, and we did have some adoptions as well. So we also had James Tully. He was a judge there, so that was really cool. But last but not least, here's just some more pictures of the window decoration, some of the pop-up events. Of course, Elf on the Shelf. Sorry, guys, he did that. We tried to stop him, but you know the elf. So here's just a few pictures, and then last but not least, I'd like to thank everybody, like I said, that helped put all these events together. The DD board, you guys for attending, HOC and some other partners, like I said. It's just going to be bigger next year, and I'm excited that we're already meeting to talk about collaborations with other partnerships to provide this. So if you can give me just a second, we are going to play the video, and thanks to Public Education for putting this together for us.
3, 2, 1.
Any questions for me? I got to turn the warm and fuzzy. So thank you. I appreciate it. You guys have a good one.
Thank you, great summary, appreciate it.
Thanks. And so moving forward, as Matt stated earlier, with our grants, we're going to take a collaborative approach with our team to really evaluate all CRA programs, particularly our grants programs, what's really working, what's not, and also see what requirements are there, what's needed, and really revamp that. Our first meeting to do that as a team is taking place next week. Also, I spent the first 30 days really meeting with staff one-on-one, kind of establishing parameters, and so the next 30 days will be focused on the community, the downtown. Thursdays in February, I will be meeting with business owners organized by Howard Smith in the downtown CRA, and also anyone outside of the downtown CRA that really wants to meet to discuss the same thing. What's going great? What are your suggestions? Help us with what keeps you here, and those types of things. Retention activities. So those strategies are planned. We're also working on strategies to program the Station Square Park. You will see, I think effective tomorrow, actually the 11th, a furniture reduction plan. So some of the furniture in the park will be stored away. We're finding that it's not fully utilized at all times, and so just for preservation's sake, we're going to store that and work to better program the park starting the spring. So we're already talking as a staff and getting strategies. We do have that plan. I'll be sure to forward that and keep you aware of what those strategies and those activities are coming up for the spring.
I'm most concerned in Station Square with the orange and blue umbrellas. It's very Gator-esque, and I find it repulsive.
All right.
You haven't been here long enough, Jerry.
Also, some innovative meetings or innovative plans we have to further program the Pinellas Trail. We have meetings this week, literally, to start talking about that collaboratively as a team. And we're looking for ways to cross-promote using our events to bring more business to downtown, and also have the businesses cross-promote and help one another out. Not sure if you've heard, but we have a new artificial intelligence project that is a partnership with the University of South Florida as well, to activate and give an augmented reality to the 4 murals down here. And we're looking to expand that to other projects. Eric and Matt are spearheading that, so we will definitely keep you in the loop about that and how it goes. And looking forward to touring North Greenwood and getting hands in, feet in there. With the help of Chuck Lane from Economic Development, we're going out on our official tour, first official tour of all things North Greenwood this week, or next week. So looking forward to that as well. Lastly, we have 2 exciting events coming up. The Heart to Guard Sports Fest is coming for their 20th anniversary, taking place downtown January 21st. More information at hearttoguard.org. Sponsored by the DDB, and also Pirates on Parade Clearwater Invasion. The downtown district takeover is taking place on the 28th of this month from 1 to 5. And so we'll definitely have more information about that on our website. Any additional questions?
Any questions? Vice Mayor.
I have just a couple. Thank you for that update. I'm so glad you're here, Jay. I have a question on the minutes from our last meeting. The first part is in response to Ms. Flaherty's concerns regarding the overflowing dumpsters near drains that should be addressed by code enforcement. She continues to send pretty graphic photos. It's unacceptable, and I'm just wondering if we can instruct our trash collectors to go by those areas like every day. And just if there are couches, if there's overflowing dumpsters, they take care of them. Because, you know, the most recent picture, she's got a little lemonade stand there and it's just trash all over the place. So something's got to be done. If code enforcement isn't enough, maybe we just send the trash collectors and then we can figure out who gets charged for what, who isn't paying for the service because it's overflowing. But it's been going on for 2 years at least, and so that was one thing. The other thing is there was a suggestion that the Market Marie have an electronic sign out on Myrtle to direct people down to Station Square Park, because that's where, and downtown. I don't know if that's been looked into. I know they're going to have their Market Marie this Saturday,
I did see that in the minutes that we were supposed to follow up with the appropriate staff about the electronic signs. We'll do that this week, today.
Okay.
We'll follow up, but I am seeing that now on that comment from the last meeting.
If it's at Myrtle and 60, it will be difficult because that has to be approved, I believe, by FDOT.
Okay.
And they're pretty stingy on what can be on dynamic message boards on state roads.
But like maybe Myrtle and Cleveland for a couple months or something. I mean, because just like, come on down this way, because normally people would see it right there on Cleveland, by the MSB, and I don't know, it's just a thought. And then I just had a question, I should know this, but I don't. What's the building that's going on? It looked like housing. I drove by and a great big wooden sign was put up on the corner of MLK and Gulf to Bay, right across from Rita's Custard, best custard ever. But what's going up there at that corner? What kind of development?
On the northeast corner?
On the east, yes, on the northeast corner. What is that?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I saw the sign too.
Yeah, what is it? It looks like, it kind of looks like housing. I mean, I was driving by, I didn't stop.
I think that's a residential lot, so I don't know either.
No, okay, I'll
We'll follow up.
stop and look. I'll just, yeah, okay. And then I had questions about the crime analysis, and, I don't know if somebody's here to answer about that, but, some of the numbers are good with Kathy Ham, our homeless outreach specialist, but there are some details that are missing. For example, Kathy Ham made contact, documented 5 new subjects needing shelter assistance. I don't know what the definition of a new subject is, that these contacts were documented into HMIS, that's great. A total of 11 subjects were provided shelter assistance to Safe Harbor, and 5 additional subjects were admitted to Pinellas Hope. How long did they stay? Did they get mental health or substance abuse services? And then we've got a bunch of, Ham assisted a mother with 3 children with diversion and assistance back to family in Georgia. One of the families was provided shelter assistance for the next 3 months. With the assistance of downtown bike teams, Ham was also able to assist 2 homeless subjects with plane tickets back to Ohio just before New Year's Eve. I applaud all that. I'm wondering where that money comes from, and then, at what cost for the next 3 months. One of the families was provided shelter assistance for the next 3 months. That's fantastic. Are they in a hotel? And where does that come from? Again, my perspective is being on the COC and understanding that we have not even nearly enough housing for families. And then also with the stats about the number of people that were helped and how, I'd like some stats on how many, if any, individuals refused services, or how many, if any, families were left in cars. So it's great to say she helped these 3 families, that's phenomenal, but if there were 8 that asked for help that she wasn't able to help, I'd like to know that too. Did she help everyone who asked? Fantastic. And then the other thing was the homeless count by location and month. We have the point in time coming up at the end of the month, and I just wanted to know how do we do this homeless count? The main library versus Coachman Park versus Cleveland Street, Station Square. I mean, are we sure that they're not repeat customers? Is it all in one day? Because I know it's hard to get an accurate count. And then St. Vincent de Paul isn't listed there, which has a lot of homeless people in the morning for breakfast especially. So just...
Major, you want to bite off any of this?
You got all that?
Mike Wallace, Deputy Chief of Police.
Yeah.
I will get you the answers on some of those. I know they do the homeless count once a month, and they do go around to each of those locations, specifically counting the number of people that they encounter. The rest of this stuff, I don't have the preparation available to give you the answer to that, but Kathy does use her resources working with the county to get some of that money, so I'll get you the answers for that, though.
Okay, sounds great.
Thanks. Anything else?
There was one follow-up item, if you want to hear about that, 306 South Washington. There is a change with that.
Yeah, I'd love to know.
Good afternoon again, Matt Jackson, CRA Assistant Director. very briefly, it was articulated that we expected 306 South Washington to come before the trustees today. However, we've been waiting on an updated sources and uses of funds because the one we had on file was incorrect. A new sources and updated sources and uses of funds was submitted with very significant changes, and the project just wasn't ready to move forward today, either by CRA, city staff, or Peter Leach, the developer. Any questions?
Questions?
Were those funds that were allocated like to Blue Sky? I mean, what are those funds that we're talking about?
These are funds we had allocated specific to 306 South Washington,
Okay.
not the Blue Sky funds.
Okay.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else, then we will adjourn the CRA and call to order the work session. Mr. Cooley, I apologize because I thought it was going to be quick, which was the kiss of death.
You ready for this?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Item 2.1.
Pinellas Community Foundation solicitation of board process overview for emergency social services and relocation programs.
So good afternoon, Mayor, council members. Happy New Year to all of you.
New Year.
If you recall, we're coming back from December. We want to give you an update on how things are going with the funds that have been allocated to Pinellas Community Foundation from the ARPA pool of funds that you have. Give you a presentation and update you on that today. I am Doug Cooley. I'm the CEO of Pinellas Community Foundation. I'm joined by Jocelyn Howard on our team, and also in the audience is Shedlene Apollon. She's a new member of the PSTA staff, so nothing like coming to a work session for your first day at the office.
Should be hazard pay.
So if you, just to remind everybody, going back to sort of the listening sessions that you had with the community, this money is to be used to provide emergency support for individuals and families that live in Clearwater who have housing and social service needs. And based on an emerging issue, we've divided this into two rounds. There's a round one that's helping to work on issues related to the closure of the Capri Mobile Home Park. That's up to $250,000. That's going to help with relocation, emergency social service support. That is scheduled to close at the end of March of this year. And then the second round, the remaining funds, no less than $650,000 to increase the ability of nonprofit organizations to support the community, but in those areas of providing support to individuals and families who have housing and social service needs. So our priority right now is the oversight and the management of what's going on with the funds for the Capri Mobile Home Park, which is closing at the end of March. We opened the funding for that at the end of December, so before the close of the year, with the goal of selecting a provider to assist residents with rehousing and connecting to other resources. Once that is done, we will move into the round two of this funding. We'll publicize that in March. We'll be collecting letters of intent in April, and we're deciding to stagger these rounds so that we can make sure we do and give proper oversight to what's going on with Capri, but then give ample time for advertising, making sure organizations know that the money is available for round two, wanting to make sure that we cast a wide net and that that's available to them. It's really a rush job with what we're doing with Capri. So just looking at the two rounds, so you know the timeline, our letter of intent for Capri went out December 22nd. That's due back by the 18th. We will have applications from that to our committee by January 24th, and we are doing a live interview of the finalists for that on January 30th, and a decision will be made at that January 30th meeting. The provider that is selected will be submitted to the city, and we'll go to contract shortly after that to get everything in place, ready to go. We do believe not only will this help with the closure that is happening in March, but there's going to need to be help after that as well for a period of time with people who are relocating out of that community. Round two, the other emergency social services not related to Capri will go advertise that in March. Letter of intent will go in April. That'll be whittled down through a letter of intent committee meeting process that will happen in May. We'll have a full application that is asked of those organizations who have passed the letter of intent process, and those will be reviewed by the committee in July, They'll have a final decision-making in August, and we'll go to contract in September for the remainder. This follows the same ARPA rules as everything else. These funds have to be encumbered or restricted by the end of 2024 and spent by the end of 2026. So we'll have that done. My guess is we'll be done long before the end of 2024 with those funds being spent and deployed to the community. Just to tell you what's going on with Capri, up to $250,000 will be awarded to a single organization to help provide for the emergency rehousing and social service support that's needed to help residents that are being displaced as that park closes. As I said, applicants are submitting a detailed letter of intent, and then we'll go to a live committee interview. It'll be here. It'll happen here on the 30th, and we'll make sure that the provider is selected on that day with everything going to the city, so you know who it is shortly after that. So for round 2, that's up to $650,000. The most an organization can request is up to $300,000 out of that pool of funds. Applicants need to submit their letter of intent. Those who score highly need to move on to a full application, and then the full application is going to be reviewed and scored by a committee of the foundation. We'll talk about committee composition in a minute. So for round 2, eligibility. Organizations have to have experience providing emergency social service support, especially to individuals and families living in Clearwater. Should include familiarity with crisis management, case navigation, and local and state social service programs. They need to be a 501c3 public charity in existence for at least 1 year at the time of application. Those organizations, 501c3s that are really designed to fundraise or do grant making on behalf of another entity, are not eligible to apply. So the organization providing the services has to apply. No government agencies may apply. We have that criteria there because we figured if you wanted to allocate funds to a government agency, you could have done that through your ARPA process. It can be a volunteer-run organization. There's no prohibition on that. And requests should be in proportion to the organization's capacity. So not to be asking far and above what their normal operating budget is. And bonus points will be awarded to those that are headquartered within the city of Clearwater. So selection criteria, so you know, again, following the same, almost the same as the application criteria. Demonstrated history of offering services here in Clearwater, case management and other social services. Show an ability to collaborate with other partners. Collaboration is key, just like it will be for Capri. Demonstration, they have to demonstrate the need using local data here and talking specifically to the needs of Clearwater. Want to be clear, the need is there for bilingual service provision, so we'll be asking how the organizations plan to provide that, and when we talk bilingual, English and Spanish. That the organization has a history of fiscal stability, and that the estimated expenses as they put in their budget are appropriate for the scope of work that they are going to undertake, and that they'll be able to handle the reporting requirements, which should not be overly onerous, but we want to make sure that they have the ability to timely complete reports so we can share that information with you and the public. So to look at review committees, we're in the process of assembling 2 committees, one for round 1, one for round 2. Committee members are being selected based on the diversity of their experience, their identity, education, expertise, and industry. And primarily, committee members will have work experience and or live within the city of Clearwater. In addition to that, I know that Chuck from the city will also participate in the committee process with us, so you'll have a city person there as well. We provide technical assistance. We do this regularly with grantees, so we want to make sure that the applicants have all the tools that are necessary and all the assistance necessary so that they can submit strong applications, and that our staff will be providing that upon request for both rounds of funding. And so a little bit more about the evaluation criteria in summary. So for round 1, for Capri, really want to make sure we're working with organizations and they'll be evaluated based on their ability to help residents secure safe, stable housing because the residents are being displaced because of the parks closing. That really will be the key criteria. What experience do they have and how have they done that before with others who may have been in a similar situation. And then for round 2, we're really looking at the strength of the outcomes that the organizations have, their ability to change knowledge, skills, behavior of people, And so looking at the strength of their outcomes, the impact of their services, and we'll be looking at, this should read not applications, but additional evaluation criteria will be developed after the letters of intent are received. So when we know the types of things that are being asked for in that, that will help refine the evaluation criteria for the final applications. I want to give you a note about transparency. This is money that is taxpayer dollars coming to us from the city of Clearwater, from the federal government. So we want to be as clear about how this is working as possible and share as much information with the public as possible. So there's a website that you can visit, which has other ARPA funding on it as well. But the city of Clearwater, you can click through and see what's happening with the city of Clearwater money. The meetings that we have will be accessible either in public, like we'll be meeting here, or they'll be virtual, and we'll have a hybrid model available so people from the public can tune into those and watch them when decisions are being made for recommendations that will come back to the city. And then recordings of all those meetings will be available on our website. That website will also have all the executed contracts and the reports that we receive from organizations, so you can see progress that's being made from all of the organizations. So I'll leave it there and see if you have questions, and this is an opportunity for you to weigh in with anything you think we need to consider before, as part of round one, which is already in process, but then anything you have us to consider for round two, we'd be happy to have your feedback.
Questions? Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Doug, and I have complete trust in the Pinellas Community Foundation and you. Anyone who's receiving money, whether it's that organization or agency that's going to work with the Capri or anyone who gets funding from the remainder, does everybody get about a 10% for administration?
We'll be asking that as part of their budget that they'll submit to make sure that the cost for administration is reasonable from the organizations. Most likely to stay in line with the ARPA funding will probably be around 10% or less.
Okay, and then have you had any applicants for the Capri work?
We have 2 that have started applications within our grant portal, and we have others that have emailed questions and submitted inquiries to Jocelyn as well.
Okay, and then $250,000 doesn't seem like a whole lot. How many people are we talking about needing to help at Capri?
How many residents are we looking at right now?
So we understand that there's 80 to 90 households.
Okay.
And as far as the actual number of folks within those, we're still learning that.
Okay, and what kind of help are we looking to provide? Helping them sell their trailer, move their trailer, relocate? I mean,
I think it's more of the relocation assistance, locating other affordable housing and other opportunity. It's very difficult to, in this environment, to move from a mobile home park into other type of housing. And I think some of you may know that this is also the neighborhood that people moved to after the closure of Southern Comfort. And so this was an affordable option for people leaving Southern Comfort. And so when that closure happened before, I don't think there was not a lot of financial resource available for that. So I think we have a leg up with $250,000 to start with there. Not everybody will necessarily need financial assistance, but I think part of it is the crisis management and trying to figure out where do I go in this environment and how do I do that. So helping individuals and families navigate through that and then provide financial assistance for relocation or other resources as they need.
Those units are rarely movable because of their condition. They just disintegrate.
I know, but I mean, so the reality is, let's say we have 80 to 90 households. Let's say 60 of them need financial help, right? And that's, where are we going to put 60 families when their house is gone at the end of March? Their home is gone at the end of March.
That's the effort of everybody. It's already being undertaken right now with a group of sort of network of social service organizations already working on that. And so I think this will be a nice shot in the arm, but organizations are already connecting with each other and connecting with the community. The city has been there and has been a part of making sure that they coalesce and try and figure out how to help. So it's not just coming in now, but I think the need will just amplify as it gets closer to the end of March.
Okay.
But this will be the first time that we've been able to help people that have been displaced, because we've had other singly owned mobile home parks.
Correct.
And there haven't been any resources.
Not huge resource Correct.
I mean, do we know the demographics? How many are actually going to stay here, or are they going to be moving?
I think that's still a question that's out there that we're trying to get our own handle on, but the city is working with others too to try and figure out exactly the composition, who is there, who wants to stay. And that's part of the crisis management and the case management is connecting. Are there other resources? Is there other family that might be available or other resources people could call upon? But this is a very challenging environment for this to be taking place in. More so than usual.
Other questions? I want to thank you for your patience. We look forward to seeing the process unfold.
Be happy to work and make sure you know what's going on as it happens. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. All right, before we go forward, we're going to take a 10-minute recess, and then we'll finish. we'll call the January 9th work session back to order. We are on item 3.1.
Approved settlement of workers' compensation claims for payment to David Dalton.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council members. My name is Todd Marone. I'm the City Risk Manager, and requesting approval for the workers' compensation settlement, $230,000, an additional $8,888 to settle claim, release from all liability, etc.
Any questions? Consent?
Yeah. Thank you.
4.1, thank you.
Approved an indemnification agreement between Enchantment LLC at 400 Gulf Boulevard and the City of Clearwater.
Good afternoon, Mike Wallach, Deputy Chief of Police. This agreement is to allow us to use the property located at 400 Gulf Boulevard, Indian Rocks Beach for a training exercise from 9 a.m. on January 25th to about 5 p.m. This training exercise requires us to complete an indemnification agreement with Enchantment LLC, which is the managing property person, and it must be brought before council. The police legal advisor has reviewed and approved this document, and this agreement is very similar to the ones that we brought before you with National Night Out and the drug take-back. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
What are we doing?
SWAT team is going to be having an exercise in a house that's being demolished.
Okay. Other questions? Consent? Yep. 5.1.
Declare a surplus a certain portion of real property located at 1,000 North Hercules Ave for the purpose of the city entering into an agreement with FlyUSA.
Good afternoon. Matt Minishby on behalf of the city. The item before you is a declaration of surplus for the Clearwater Airpark. This declaration is going to allow us to enter into a lease and operating agreement with FlyUSA PV. Of course, we should be hearing a lot more about this lease coming up today. This process is required by our charter for leases in excess of 5 years. It's a very standard process we've used many times over the years. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Could you just, for the public, we've gotten questions about the fact that it's going into surplus and the need for that. I just want people's mind to be put at rest. We're not selling the property.
We are definitely not selling the property. This is just a formality required by our charter. Essentially, since it's going to be for more than 5 years, we have to do this process here. It's essentially to make sure that you all are involved if we're entering into long-term leases.
And this is companion item to item 8.1.
Correct.
Any other questions? All right. 5.2.
Approve a construction manager at-risk contract and pre-construction phase proposal with Scoyoc Contracting for the beach marina replacement.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Jeff Walker, Senior Professional Engineer with the Public Works Department. You will recall last October the beach marina master plan was presented to council by the design consultant Moffitt and Nickel. During that work session, Eric Gandy and Nicole Pauley went over the marina's history, its current condition, and described the new marina layout. Council's consensus, was to move forward with the design process and stressed repeatedly that this important project be done right. Moffitt and Nickel have now completed the marina's 30% design phase and have requested we bring on the RFQ selected construction manager at risk, Jay Kokalakis, for the purpose of providing constructability, construction phasing and scheduling reviews, value engineering options, construction cost estimates at the 30, 60, 90% design stages, and ultimately the 100% maximum guaranteed price. Identification of anticipated construction challenges and cost-effective solutions will also be provided. At this time, I'm happy to hear your comments or questions.
Questions? Vice Mayor?
Is this the construction manager at risk that we used with Imagine Clearwater, or we're using with Imagine Clearwater? No? Okay. And then you're saying that we have 30% of the design phase is complete now?
Just recently.
Are we going to get an update on that?
Yes.
Okay. And understand that the challenges, one of the most challenging part is going to be along Coronado?
Yes. We're going to try to relieve the congestion along Coronado.
Mm-hmm.
We will relieve the congestion along.
That's fantastic. That's what we
The
need.
Marina Walk right now, as designed at 30%, is 40 feet wide west of the Marina Cantina.
Okay.
So it's a very wide Marina Walk. Then it narrows down to 13 feet in front of the Marina Cantina to the east.
Well, I'm concerned about in front of the boats, in front of the pirate ship, and the screamer and all that. That's where,
They're not going to be on Coronado now. They're going to be in that Marina Walk, just west of those boats.
Great.
I mean, north of those boats.
so we'll get an update shortly, like within the next few months at the
Yes, staff-
30%?
Staff has just received it, we're reviewing it, and then we'll send it your way.
That'll be great. Thanks. Very good.
Councilmember.
No, I'm good.
Clearwater is a pretty prolific contractor, but what is their experience with building marinas?
We chose them because they have marina experience, but they've done the Tampa Yacht Club, the Naples City Dock, and the Tin City Naples docks. So they have marina experience. They also did our North Wave Attenuator replacement at the harbor. But they have, why we really like them was they have the beach, the Clearwater beach experience. They did the North parking garage and plaza, they did the Walgreens north of the island, they did the Ron John's and Hooters. They know that area. And, you know, there was problems with
I just
that.
want to make sure we don't repeat the problems that we have downtown. And I know part of that is a design issue, but also want somebody with experience doing floaters and fixed docks.
Right.
So you're telling me they have that experience?
They do, and the two marinas are, like they say in real estate, location, location, location. They're completely different locations, and
I know the currents are very different.
the fetch is completely different.
Right. Okay. Other questions? Consent?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. 6.1.
Approve amendments to the Clearwater Comprehensive Plan Utilities element to address the City of Clearwater's potable water supply facilities work program.
Dylan Prince, Plan Development. This proposed ordinance contains amendments to the utilities element of the Clearwater Comprehensive Plan to include updated information based on the recent update to the potable water supply facilities supply work plan, completed by McKim and Creed, Inc. Florida statutes require cities to update their 10-year water supply facilities work plans every 5 years following the approval of the Water Management District's Regional Water Supply Plan. This update was last completed in 2017. There are no substantial changes proposed within this amendment, which primarily incorporates updated data from the updated 10-year water supply facilities work plan. The city's efforts implementing various conservation and consumption measures has led to a reduced water consumption rate of 62 gallons per person per day, down from 76 gallons per person per day in 2016. The Community Development Board reviewed the proposed amendment at its meeting on December 20th, 2022, and unanimously recommended the amendment for approval. As this is a text amendment to the comprehensive plan, review and approval by the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity is required. As a part of the state review, the proposed amendments will be transmitted to various state agencies in Pinellas County for review prior to second reading by City Council, which is anticipated to occur in April. Are there any questions?
Any questions? Vice Mayor.
I just wanted to say thank you. I like pages 19, 20, and 21. You're referencing green print as a plan and how that work fits in with that, so that's fantastic, green print and its goals. There's a section that says our rates need to be renegotiated this year. When do we expect that to be talked about? And
Can we see if Public Works is here to answer that? You know,
okay,
I can try to find that information for you.
okay. And then one other little thing, because we're reading that big document and talking about water and wells and preserving wells. There was a resident on Clearwater Beach that had asked me about cisterns. Do we use them in this area at all? Is it,
I have to refer again to.
okay. Those are the only things I had noted on the
I can
document.
follow up for you.
Okay.
Other questions? All right, 6.2.
Approve amendments to the Clearwater Code of Ordinances clarifying and repealing certain business tax receipt categories for seasonal sales and internment merchants and vendors.
Good afternoon, Gina Clayton, Planning and Development. The proposed amendment to the Clearwater Code of Ordinance includes 3 revisions to the city's business tax receipt categories. One amendment clarifies that VTR subcategory 070.070 applies to all types of seasonal uses. Right now, that code is narrowed to just a couple. So historically, seasonal sales for things like fireworks and Mother's Day flowers, those are not covered by this category. So this amendment will put all of those uses under the same category. The other 2 amendments eliminate 2 categories that are for itinerant merchants and vendors at markets, and examples who typically pay this would be the Marine Market, Shopping with a Vibe. And so this amendment proposes to eliminate those categories, which will reduce costs for these types of activities for small businesses and that attract people to our redevelopment areas and ultimately make our city more vibrant and active. We anticipate there'll be little impact on our overall BTR revenues. We've estimated the reduction will be only about $1,000 a year, and as you know, we generate about $2 million in BTR revenues.
This seems very reasonable. Any questions? Vice Mayor?
I thought it seemed reasonable as well, but I was wondering, it doesn't apply to the vendors at Pier 60 that go out there weekly or nightly?
That's, I believe, part of a special event.
Okay. And then I just had one other question that it comes down at future items, but maybe you can answer. I'd like an update on the BTR report so it's due, isn't it due by the end of October, all the business tax receipt payments from businesses? Like there's a window, is it?
Well, they're renewed every year. They
Yeah.
have to be renewed by October.
Yeah, so do we have, at some point, information about, did anyone fill out the optional demographic questions that we had this year?
I don't know.
Yeah, and then the other thing is, we can track then new businesses, so new BTRs this year, as well as ones that did not renew, we can assume they're leaving. So we can gauge how many new businesses came to Clearwater and how many left.
We could run reports to do that, but just because someone didn't pay their BTR doesn't
mean they're not here.
that they're not there.
Yeah.
So we do enforcement, we send additional notices. There is a fee escalator if you don't pay all of that, and then we go out and do enforcement.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? 6.3.
Approve the North Greenwood Community Redevelopment Area Plan.
Jamie Lofco, Planning and Development. I'm not going to bore you with the presentation again unless you would like me to go through it, but would just ask if you have any other questions or comments on the plan.
Any new questions in the last half hour? No? Okay. 6.4. Thank you.
Approve establishing a redevelopment trust fund for the North Greenwood Community Redevelopment Area.
Again, Jamie Lofco, Planning and Development. This is the 3rd piece of our puzzle for the redevelopment area plan. We're required to have the trust fund created to allocate the TIF increment to a separate fund to make sure it is separated before it is expended. And it is, the ordinance creates the fund, states how it will function, its term for the 20-year period. It is an ordinance, so it does require 2 readings. So first reading would be on the 12th, this Thursday, and then second reading on the 2nd. And again, this will be passed on to the county with the plan if it is approved, and anticipate April or May 2023 for that.
Any questions? All right, 6.5.
Accept the annual report of the status of transfers of development rights.
Thank you, Kyle Brotherton, Planning and Development. So transfer of development rights, for some background information, is a conveyance of development rights by deed, easement, or other legal instrument from a parcel or parcels of land, the sending site, to another parcel or parcel of land, the receiving site. TDRs are enabled through the Counter-Ag rules and are governed by Article 4, Division 14 of the city's Community Development Code. And the process for approval of any TDR is through a Level 2 Flexible Development FLD application and approval by the Community Development Board. Properties located within the city's redevelopment areas, so Beach by Design, US 19, and downtown, may only transfer development rights to properties within those areas. And through this program, development rights may be sold by one property owner, the sending site, to be used by another property owner on a receiving site, which would allow the receiving site to utilize the extra density or intensity. It should be noted that this does not create new density, but it rather shifts where the density and intensity are used throughout the city. So this past year, the CDB approved the use of TDRs from 2 properties. On June 21st, 2022, the board approved FLD 2020-05012A and TDR 2022-01001 and TDR 2020-07002A for the transfer of 17 hotel unit development rights from the setting sites located at 420 Hamden Drive and 170 Brightwater Drive to the receiving site at 405 East Shore for a hotel project. And since 1999, 37 TDR applications have been submitted to the Planning and Development Department for consideration by the CDB. And the statuses of those applications are as follows. So 12 of those have been completed and built. 7 applications were approved, but are still going through the site plan approval project, or they just haven't been constructed yet. 17 TDR applications have expired as the site development projects were not constructed within the required timeframes, and 1 application has been denied. I'd be happy to try and answer any questions.
Any questions? Consent? All right, 6.6.
Council, items 6.6 and 6.7 are being continued to February 16. Both of their companion items, their hearings at CDB were continued, so that's why we're continuing.
Any questions on those?
I did have a question.
Yes.
On the amendment to our comprehensive plan to address the creation of new Parks and Rec impact fee system, I just wanted to know if that discussion was going to be brought to the Parks and Rec Advisory Board at all, to let them know about what's proposed or why or what that might mean.
I will have to get back to council on that. Since I do not see Parks and Rec staff present, I do not know if it's on the agenda.
Because I think, isn't there a meeting at the end of the month for Parks and Rec? Okay.
All right, 7.1.
Approve a work order to Jones Edmonds and Associates for the East Water Reclaim Facility Screw Pump Replacement Project.
Hi, my name is, or good afternoon, sorry. My name is Jeremy Brown. I'm an engineering manager with the Public Utilities Department. This project will replace the 3 screw lift pumps at the East Water Reclamation Facility. The screw pumps use this Archimedes screw principle, which is basically a screw inside of a hollow cylinder. In this case, I guess it's a half of a cylinder, and it's tilted at an angle. And as the screw turns, it moves water, in this case water, from a lower elevation to a higher elevation. These screw pumps at the East plant are about 6 to 7 feet in diameter and about 25 feet long, so they're pretty significant. And this is, as I mentioned, to design the replacements. I'm happy to respond to any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Brown? Consent?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
7.2.
Authorize a purchase order to Odyssey Manufacturing Company for liquid sodium hypochlorite.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Rich Gardner, Director of Public Utilities. Before you today is for the authorization of a purchase order for sodium hypochlorite or bleach used for treatment at the water and wastewater facilities. Sodium hypochlorite is used for disinfection of drinking water and reclaimed water prior to distribution, as well as treated effluent prior to discharge to surface waters. There were 2 respondents to the request for bids, and we're recommending award to Odyssey Manufacturing in the amount not to exceed $1,200,000. This will be a 1-year contract through January 16th of 2024 with the option for 2 1-year renewals. I'm asking for you to authorize the purchase order, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Didn't we just approve a contract a few meetings ago?
Yeah, you approved an increase.
Okay.
And you said, I hope we're going out to get prices.
And you did.
These are the prices. I listened to you.
Okay. You're the only person, Rich. And you talked to my wife.
Yeah.
Thank you. Consent?
Yes.
All right, 8.1.
Approve an Airpark lease and property operations agreement between the city and FlyUSA.
Afternoon, Mayor, Council. Eric Gandy, Marine and Aviation Director. What we have for you today is a lease agreement between FlyUSA PV and the City of Clearwater. This is a culmination of a lot of effort that started back this summer when we went out for an RFP. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank everyone who participated in the negotiations. It was contemplative. We listened, and we listened some more to the public, to every one of you, to users of that Airpark. And I think we came up with a really comprehensive agreement that tries to cover all the bases. We recognize that that's an impossibility sometimes, but we did our level best to try and pursue solutions to any problem that was presented to us. And I must say that the Finance Department, City Manager's Office, and in particular, Engineering Department and Legal were exceptional counterparts in this process. Matt Middich is our Assistant City Attorney and tirelessly worked on this agreement to ensure that the city's interests were protected. So what does this agreement do? First and foremost, you know, we've talked about in the RFP intensity, because that's been a hot button issue around the Airpark for years. A lot of it has to do with flight schools and helicopters, so we incorporated some measures of intensity and reduction into the agreement. Currently, the flight school can operate from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. 7 days a week. That's the current conditions. What we've done is to, and I'll specify them here for the public's edification, is really be very specific as to when the flight school can operate. As far as the new conditions go, all operators, there's no activity on Sunday before 11. There's no pattern work 30 minutes after sunset. There's no operations on Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, or the 4th of July. As far as the helicopters go, they're prohibited after 6 p.m. They're prohibited before 12 p.m. Saturday and Sunday. And there's some additional holidays that are added for the helicopters. Are MLK Day, Labor Day, Veterans Day, and Memorial Day. So I think that alone is a significant departure from the current conditions. And furthermore, we've got some aspirational goals in there that we set as far as further reductions in helicopter activity. So I think that you know, that was something that was a significant concern to the community, and we really tried to address that. And FlyUSA was really thoughtful about that and understood the need to make those reductions. What I would say, and I've said this to you before, no matter what agreement we come to you with, these little airports are always heavily subsidized. That's just the nature of what they are. The financials are such that there's not a lot of opportunity to make that money necessary to cover all those costs. I'll go into the financials here in a minute, and I think it goes a long way, and FlyUSA really kind of leaned into this one in terms of the compensation component to try and address some of these capital improvement projects. The other thing we did is, it is critical, we had to maintain this Airpark as a public use airport. In any grant language, public use airport is critical, which means the operator can't shut down runways, use it for other purposes. It has to be maintained as a public use airport, and that's the value to the city of Clearwater. We're very rare in terms of a municipality, particularly in this region, having an airport, and that means transportation. So I think that's really important to emphasize, that it has to be a public use airport, and that's one of the first things we specified in the lease agreement. We also, you know, really touched base on some of the oversight components. There's been criticism of my department previously of, you know, oversight issues, and you know, they were operating with a 22-year-old lease, and a lot of things weren't really specified in terms of you know, requirements there. And I don't think it's a fault of anybody, but I think this lease goes a long way to address some of those things that we identified throughout the process. And it has been a process. First and foremost, the operator is going to manage all the hangar rentals, the subleases with city approval, wait lists, pump and fueling services, and at the end of the year, we're going to have a comprehensive financial report and operating report that addresses some of these things and really demonstrates how successful they were and what things look like. So it'll give us a good measure year to year, indicating, you know, how things are going out there. I'll go into of the financials, because I think that's, the thing that is important. We're not in the business to make money here. Obviously, money is important. It allows us to maintain it, keep it in a fashion that's really representative of our city, and I think that the financials kind of speak to a lot of that. Glasses on here. So basically what this does, the agreement transfers approximately $12,000 a month of our operating costs to FlyUSA. Those are our security costs and stormwater, to name a couple. So right off the top, they're assuming that responsibility. In addition to that, they're going to pay us $20,000 a month plus a 3% annual increase. And together that equates to approximately $32,000 a month in generated rent if we were to look at it from those terms. But most significantly, they will provide us $2.4 million for capital projects that's fully reimbursable to the city. So if we spend money to build the new terminal, up to $2.4 million is fully reimbursable to the city from FlyUSA. And we've set that reimbursement up on a quarterly basis in this latest agreement. I think that's really important because we can then leverage those funds with FDOT funding. Most of the time it's a 50-50 match, but there are times in projects that it could qualify for an 80-20 match, depending on the type of project we're speaking to. So that's a significant investment from FlyUSA, hence the initial renewal unilateral on their terms. So the first renewal would be their decision, and they need the 10-year certainty because of the significant investment they're going to put into it going forward. We do have a revenue share component in the second renewal term. So in year 11, the monthly rent will increase by $25,000 a month, which is a significant increase. That's when they expect to be profitable in year 11. The only caveat to that is if any of our projects expend more than $2.4 million, FlyUSA will cover that overage, but our increased rent will be deferred for every $25,000. It will be deferred a month. So these projects are all upon agreement between the parties. Certainly they're concerned about monitoring costs, as are we. We don't want to put ourselves in a position where we never see an increased rent component or a profit share. So we have to manage the projects accordingly and be really mindful of what that looks like. There'll always be a situation, my department's going to work towards pursuit of some penny funding to leverage against that FDOT funding for some of the capital maintenance projects. There's so many of them, if you will, that to ask any FBO operator that would have responded to this RFP to cover all those costs, no one would have responded. So we're going to do our level best to pursue additional funding sources so we can leverage that against FDOT money. So, that's kind of the high points of this thing. It's 40 pages long. I know it's a lot to get through. And, I like to try and keep things relatively concise, but this really needed to address a lot of contingencies and what-ifs and concerns. And, I think that is reflective in the fact that it is a lengthy document. Matt really worked hard to ensure that all our bases were covered, and he insulated the city. So with that, I have Matt Middich here. I have Barry Shevlin here from FlyUSA, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Albritton.
I know you've been working on this a long time, and it's like threading a needle because there's so many different perspectives on what people want for this Airpark. But, we do want to see it succeed. We want to see it there in another 7 years if we don't do something out of the box like what's being proposed, I don't think it's gonna be there. So, but we've all had lots of emails from concerned parties all around this issue. Just a question on an email that came in to me on I guess the size of the aircraft that's gonna be allowed there. You were talking turboprops, but not jet planes. I mean, can you be specific about, I guess we had a jet land there the last couple of days, and some people wrote about that with concern.
I think Barry can speak to that because of his business model, but yes, there are limitations, and there are weight limitations and size limitations as to what can go in there, but Barry can speak to it as it relates to the business model and what business he's trying to attract.
Yeah, we've been pretty consistent in our messaging from the beginning that our intention is to cycle out roughly 10% of the current tenants at the park, which are the planes that aren't flying, the derelict planes, and get to a point where 10% of the planes based there are turboprop planes. So the operators we're talking to run Pilatus PC-12s, which come in there occasionally, and King Airs. So that is the plane types that we're targeting as tenants there.
Okay.
I had a question about, you talked about what the new conditions are going to be. No activity on Sunday before 11, no pattern 30-minute after sunset, all those. Will those be effective as soon as the contract is signed?
No, they'd be effective March 1st.
Okay.
When we take over.
Okay, so early, this spring. And then you also said, furthermore, aspirational goals and further reductions in helicopter activity. I was struck by aspirational. I thought it was in the contract that there is a reduction, a planned reduction over like 5 years. So they're not aspirational, they're part of the contract?
Yes, they're included in the contract. How we get there is a reduction in the number of helicopters that are stationed there.
Right.
So that's how that is designed to occur.
Okay, but it will occur. It's not hoping, it will be reduced.
So if you reduce, so if we have 6 there now and we reduce down to 2, in theory, it should reduce that level of activity by the mere reduction of those types of aircraft and the numbers associated with the flight school.
It came down to a little bit of what we have control over and what we don't.
Mm-hmm.
So we certainly have control over the number and type of planes that the flight school have there. So that is our primary mechanism to reduce that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So you can have 2, but they can still be, up all day, right? During those hours. Okay, so when you talked about the new conditions, who's responsible for enforcing those? Takeoffs not before noon and all that kind of stuff that you went through.
So this lease is as close as we come to a triple net lease where the responsibilities fall to Barry and his folks. And they're going to be managing that and managing those activities.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, the idea and the way this works is that if he has issues that needs our intervention with, he reaches out to us. But we're reliant on the operator in these circumstances to manage the activities that go on at the airport.
So if you think about it, once we have our lease executed with you, we will then go create a lease with the flight school. The restrictions that we're putting in place in your lease will also be in the flight school lease. It's too premature for me to tell you what their remedies would be to be able to rectify a breach of the agreement. I mean, we're just not that far down the road, which was kind of the spirit behind. We couldn't negotiate everything simultaneously, but the spirit behind why that language may be a little loose. But we assure you of what our intentions are to reduce that activity by 50% in the first term of the lease. Does that make sense?
It does. So if something happens before noon on Saturday or Sunday, or they fall outside of these new parameters, residents will have a number to call, and it won't be the city, it'll be you or whoever's managing it.
Correct.
Okay. And then
But they'll still always call the city
sure.
ultimately. They call Barbara and David today, and then
Yeah.
we hear anyway. I think we have to be realistic about that.
Okay. And then, I guess the other thing is, you know, Mr. Shevlin, are you, familiar with Greenprint, and are you going to incorporate some of those goals, redoing all the parking? I'm thinking, if I'm flying up in a plane for a few hours, I want to plug in my electric car, and what the future demands, and helping us meet those goals, because that's our property still. So, you are familiar, and
Yes, I am. And as a matter of fact, I was one of the early adopters of EVs, and I've been driving electric vehicles since 2013.
Gotcha.
And when we were running Vology, we put, I think, 10 charging stations in our parking lot, and that was 5 years ago. So definitely aligned with where you want to go with that, Vice Mayor.
because you're paying all the utilities, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, good. Oh, but then, if we think about it, so if you're going to be putting EV chargers out there, which I hope you'll put a whole bunch, because it's public land, you're going to be using whatever contract we have for EV chargers? Is that right? You don't get to choose ChargePoint or whatever?
So anything that we build out there, we have to go through our procurement process.
Okay.
That's just a requirement because it's still city-owned property, the permitting and all of those things have to go through our procurement processes. And our review processes in terms of incorporating solar and the feasibility of those types of things, since you guys made that change.
And do you anticipate you collecting fees on EV charging out there? You think it would be part of the city parking structure and stuff?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, like, you're operating the whole thing, so you've got your users who are parking in the parking lot out there at the Airpark.
Right.
And if I'm being charged to use the EV charger, are you collecting that?
I mean, I think I'd like to get it to a point where we weren't charging for the EV chargers.
Okay.
But I'm not sure I want to.
Yeah,
That would be,
Okay.
we would use our best efforts to get
Yeah.
to that place.
great.
A couple questions. On the pro forma, you have Mike at 15, Eric at 10, and Aaron at 7. What is that?
I know.
Those are percentages of our salaries.
I figured that's what it was, but it's not explicit.
Mike may increase because he's going to be out there a lot, but that's what we base the pro forma off of.
Okay. And then on the full-time salaries, I mean, are you running on the same fiscal year as we are? Are they going to be, this pro forma, is this running on the same fiscal year as we're going to be running on, or are they running on a calendar year?
So we based it on our fiscal year, and we
Okay.
based it on when we had funds allocated in terms of FDOT funding availability. So it doesn't tie to the contract. We did it based on where we have potential funding sources. So when you see on that pro forma, $1 million, $1.4 million, those are the years that we anticipated building those projects. It's very likely that they will be moved forward, but we haven't broached the topic with FDOT other than have informal communications with them, because I didn't want to move or make a request to move money without an agreement.
No, it's just, there's, to me, an irregularity that I just didn't understand. So if you look at the full-time salaries, they're higher in '23 than they are in '24 and '25, and they don't even catch up until you get into 2032. And the same thing with insurance.
Security, right?
I beg your pardon?
I think those are the costs that we're starting to assume from you.
Yes.
In March. So like the overnight security is in your payroll today. We start absorbing that March 1st. So your payroll's going down March 1st, which is midway through your year.
Yeah, we kept having to move it because we didn't have an agreement. So we moved those security costs up to when the contract, because we still have to pay them until March. So that's the discrepancy comes from.
But that's why I'm asking.
Yes.
Is this calendar year or is it fiscal year?
It's our fiscal year. The pro forma was based off our fiscal year.
Okay. And then currently, how many aircraft are there for training? Not the helicopters, but actual flight school? we know that?
Approximately 20, I don't have an exact number today. Approximately 20 fixed-wing aircraft and 6 helicopters.
And how many do we anticipate going forward?
I'm not sure I can answer that. I mean, I know the helicopters would be less than half of 6, so no more than 3 helicopters based there, but we haven't really talked about the fixed-wing planes yet.
That's got to be part of your revenue sources, so you don't have any anticipation of how many?
No, I do not. I mean, it doesn't make a difference to me if it's a flight school plane or a different plane. I'm not sure I understand the question, Mayor.
Well, I mean, if you have flight schools and they're landing and taking off all the time, it's different activity than somebody who has an aircraft and they come over and jump in and go up to Crystal River and take off, and then they come back
True.
8 hours later. I think goes to intensity.
Gotcha.
So that's one of my questions is, what do you anticipate in your pro formas? What have you?
The biggest change in our performance is anticipating having 10 or 15 turboprops based there, which have very different missions than the plane you're describing.
Okay, well, and you don't think you'll have an answer on that then, before Thursday?
I can do some work before Thursday to have an answer for you.
I'm just curious. It's a question I'm getting asked, and I can't answer it, so.
Okay. The restrictions on the flight training in the lease were really, there were some global restrictions, but the 50% reduction was really tied to helicopters, not to all training, just to be clear. So we've been focused on reducing the helicopter training as opposed to reducing all of the training for that 50% goal, just so that is everyone's understanding, right?
Another question was on turning over of the property. Is there anything that we're going to have to do contractually? On page 27, there's information about turning the property over. Is there any additional responsibilities or expenditures that we're going to have? Or is it pretty much as is?
Which section are you referring to, sir?
17.2A.
Do you want to address that one?
So the main thing is going to be go ahead and sign the lease over. There shouldn't be too much to be done beyond that besides, just dynamics that Eric and Barry are going to have to work out. Working on the new lease documents is going to be important and things of that nature.
There's no major expenditure that we're going to have to fix something that is...
We're currently working through the pavement management plan, so we have significant expenses for the pavement, but that's been in the works for some time, and that money's been allocated for that purpose. Several $100,000 on our end, upwards maybe $300,000, $400,000 for our part of the grant, because we have some pavement that's deteriorated to the point where it's potholed and creates a safety issue. So that's a significant project. We're working with engineering on that and looking at those areas that need immediate attention first.
And that money's budgeted in a CIP already?
Yes.
Okay.
As is $750,000 of penny money in the future for the terminal.
Okay, but there's no other surprises?
I think there's probably always going to be surprises out there. The maintenance hangar is built in the 50s. So we know that there are issues with that hangar, and that's why I preface all of this by there are going to be situations where we have to address these capital maintenance projects vis-a-vis finance and potentially a request to council. Because our reserves, we put away $25 grand a year. The reserves are insufficient even with the FDOT match sometimes to replace on our own an entire maintenance hangar or refurbish it. It's just the reality of what's gone on out there in the margins being what they are. But that hangar to me is probably one in immediate need of attention in terms of some of the larger hangars out there. Again, it was from the 50s and they moved it from the landings to that location is my understanding. So if you can imagine a metal building from the 50s, that's what we're working with. But so those are the two significant projects, and the pavement maintenance rolls forward. So as it deteriorates, we get new reports and we address other areas, and that's mill, overlay, sometimes kind of lower level measures to address those pavement problems.
And the hangar, do we have any idea of what that
We haven't even,
cost is going to be?
I would say several $1 million off the top of my head for a 9,000 square foot hangar. Significantly expensive. However, at 50/50, it looks better, but that's the reality of what it is. Could it be updated? I don't even know. We haven't even scratched the surface on that yet, but just looking at it and photographing it when I went out there, it's got some issues and it would require an engineering study to see if it's salvageable. But that's the main maintenance hangar out there. There's some other, the shade hangars, you can walk into those and look through and see the sky, but there's some significant issues that we're looking at. But that's, part of kind of this overarching capital infusion from FlyUSA is, so do we rehabilitate the maintenance hangar? Do we build a new maintenance hangar? How do we approach those things? What we did was specify certain projects that we were all comfortable with, but recognize that the city still has obligations to these maintenance projects that have just gone unattended. I think a lot of the model, and it's not a criticism, it's just what the folks were dealing with at the time. Do you rehab an old hangar and collect the same rent, or you build a brand new hangar and collect a new stream of revenue? Well, the department was keeping sort of, their cash flow in a positive area, so you build the new hangar for a new source of revenue, and maybe the old hangar didn't get the attention it needs. But it's just the reality of what they face, pay the bills and cover your operating expenses. Well, the wise investment is to build a new one and get a new source of revenue, but it neglected the original hangar.
And we're not going to be taking any FAA money, correct?
No, we did, so everyone knows, we had a meeting with FAA, and unequivocally, if we take the funding, it has to be open at all times.
Okay. Other questions? Vice Mayor?
Any timeline on responses from FDOT for grants? What are you thinking?
So again, we have to go into the program and make those requests, and then there's legislative activity that has to occur. So the unfortunate part of this taking as long as it does is that we haven't moved the money without an agreement. We haven't made and I say move the money, we haven't made the request to move the money without an agreement. Obviously, we wouldn't want to move the money forward and then not be able to build something and have to give the money to another region.
So not this legislative session?
So we're going to, if we get an agreement on Thursday, that's the first order of business, is to make those requests of FDOT. Because timetable is critical to this project, and this lease agreement is to try and get these things done. The caveat is that if we don't get anything done, the agreement still requires FlyUSA to run this and manage this airport for a period of 5 years.
Be nice with money.
Well, there's other ways to go about it too, so. Okay. We'll talk further about this on Thursday. 9.1. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Set interim salary for interim city manager Jennifer Poirrier at 20%.
120% of her current.
Really?
Right?
Not for taxpayers.
I said just 1/5. Good afternoon, Billy Kirkpatrick, Human Resources, here to discuss the interim city manager salary.
Any questions?
No.
Consent?
Yeah.
10.1. Thank you.
Appoint an individual to the Airpark Advisory Board to fill the remainder of an unexpired term through April 30, 2025. Council members, in your agenda pack, you had applications for Travis Norton, Dennis Rober, and Greg Art. Mr. McNeil resigned earlier in the year, in the summer, and we finally received some applications for you to consider.
Councilmember Albrecht.
I read the applicants. I think Dennis Roper would be a good one. I know he's been involved before.
I like Greg Art. I think he looks great as a retired pilot, and Mr. Roper already served. That's why I lean a little more towards Mr. Art.
I like both of these people. I would think that Dennis Roper might bring some more important experience.
I like both, but I am leaning towards Dennis.
I don't know Greg Art. I've never met him. His credentials look good. I appreciate Mr. Norton applying. I think Mr. Roper and Mr. Art are the clear choices. I'm fine with Mr. Roper, but we can vote on Thursday. Okay? 10.2.
Appoint Linda Byars to the Neighborhood and Affordable Housing Advisory Board as a citizen who is actively engaged as a professional in connection with affordable housing with a term to expire June 30, 2026. Council members, I received an application over the weekend from the current member whose term expires. She was Miss Lindsay Dykes Harrison. I had it at your seats on the dais. She submitted the application on Friday after the agenda was published. For your consideration as well. She was serving an unexpired term, and I have no absences that I had to report. So she's interested in being reappointed, and there was also an application by Linda Byars, who is a city resident who works for the city of St. Pete in the same category.
So Ms. Dykes Harrison, does she not live in the city?
No, she does not.
Okay.
This position does not require individuals to live
Residency.
within the city, but
Linda Byers worked here. She was my secretary on DDB before Ann came.
Well, Lindsay does a good job on the board. I mean, I attend a lot of those meetings, and she really is engaged. I think she adds a lot. And if what did she just get her application in late for a renewal of her term?
yes, we tried. We reached out to her several times, and I held off on the appointment, and finally, I guess she finally saw that the appointment was out.
I don't think well, yeah, you said she doesn't miss meetings.
No.
She's here, she participates.
No, I have no absences to report. She just failed to submit an application.
So take it on, I'm fine with that.
I think,
Well, if somebody's on and they've shown up and they're doing it, then I believe in reappointing, so.
Yep.
Agreed.
Okay, consent on that?
Yep.
10.3. Any questions?
Appoint Robert Kantor to Sister Cities Advisory Board with the term to expire January 12, 2027. Mr. Ballard was not interested in being reappointed, but I did have an application by Mr. Kantor for your consideration,
And we have no one else.
and no one else.
So I think Mr. Kantor is in. 10.4.
Appoint an individual to the Municipal Code Enforcement Board to fill a term through January 12, 2026. Council members, Ms. Davis is interested in reappointment. She is the current board member. And for your consideration, we also have Robert Kenny, who submitted an application, and after seats on the dais, I had an application for Mr. Schultz. You'll notice that a lot of it is redacted. He is a former Gardner Litem, so that's why the information is redacted. But he previously served on Code Board as well.
I know Sarah. I mean, I haven't been to the Code Enforcement Board meetings, but I would vouch for Sarah staying on. She doesn't have any absences. She's been fine.
No, actually she does. She was absent December 15th, July 27th, and October 26th.
Yeah, 25% of the time. I think that's a lot.
Well, how about we wait until Thursday and see if she wants to appear, make a statement about why those absences happen?
I'm fine to wait until Thursday and hear, but if I don't, I'm pretty much of a stickler on attendance.
I know, me too.
So unless there's a really good reason, I'm not interested in reappointment, but, okay.
Thursday. Okay.
10.5,
Approve an agreement with Scoyoc Associates, Inc. to provide lobbying services at the federal level from January 12th, 2023 through December 31st, 2027 at a cost of $7,500 per month plus estimated expenses of $3,000 not to exceed $93,000 per year, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Council members, as is our process, we did go out and issued an RFP and reviewed the responses. We received responses from Batty and Associates, Denton's US, and Scoyoc, and Scoyoc was selected as the top responsive proposal. Staff, I think it's obvious. I have no concerns. I think in the last few years, particularly with COVID, Mr. Glenn has been very helpful, not only from the appropriations process, but also on the legislative updates and keeping staff and council abreast as to what's going on in DC. And there were no concerns raised during the RFP process through the committee. The committee was composed of the Assistant City Manager Jennifer Poirrier and the City Attorney David Margolis.
I think Mr. Glenn is top-notch. He's well-known in DC. He knows the ins and outs. He's respected by both Democrats and Republicans. I think we'd be crazy until he retires to think of anybody else, but that's just my opinion.
That's my opinion too.
I just have a couple comments. So I looked at the consultant services agreement, and we've got broadened business development efforts already initiated by the city to attract and enhance major corporate presence in the city of Clearwater. Just like a report on that. I read some of the successes that have been significant, but what does that look like, and what has that been in the last few years? On G, it says research and identify grant funding or other opportunities for funds. Will he be working with, we have a grant writer that we've hired, correct?
We have a grants coordinator, and he has always, anytime there is a grant opportunity at the federal level through the agencies, he does advise. And I'm also now sharing that information with Sarah, so when those opportunities come around, she contacts staff to see if there is any interest, but more importantly, are we able to apply? So he does notify us.
Okay. And when we talk about grants that we got, like we've got the almost $1 million from Charlie Chris for the Imagine Clearwater, like who claims credit for that? You know what I mean? I know everybody plays a part. Is that kind of what it is when you say, oh, this person secured that grant funding?
I would say I would give the credit where the legislator, they're the ones, sponsoring and bringing it into law. But if it really wasn't for Harry's help, he's really doing the work in terms of making sure, working with staff, and he helps me identify those projects that our legislators wanted to pursue.
And the required data for a grant application and all that, okay. And then arrange meetings for city elected officials and personnel with congressional members and staff. Provide logistical support and attend those meetings when necessary. So does this mean that, if I take a trip to Washington DC, he'll help me meet with our
If you advise me when you go, I will let him know. If you have specific agencies or legislators you would like to meet with, I will advise. But I know typically in the past when mayor also has attended meetings, also let's see with the gas, when he's always arranged those. But I need to know so I can let them know.
So ordinarily, the manager, Ms. Call, and myself would always go up to DC for a quick trip to meet with our congressmen and senators and just keep relations going. Harry always helps with that. Oftentimes when I am up for U.S. Conference of Mayors, I will drop in just to see our legislators. It's good to see them on their turf up there.
And Harry helps facilitate that? That would be good, because I have a son and daughter-in-law who live in DC, so if I go visit and want to help, Okay. And then the last one is engage in advocacy to promote the city's position on priority issues, including appropriate interest groups like the National Association of Counties and U.S. Conference of Mayors and all that stuff. But if he's engaging in advocacy to promote the city's position on priority issues, if those include talking points or data points, I'd like to have access to that so that, when I meet with residents who care about something at the federal level, I've got some information to share with them if they want to write their...
That typically includes, let's say there's legislation that's being considered, he'll let me know what is Clearwater's thoughts on it. I will share with the appropriate department director. And when he is at those meetings, he will advise them, this is Clearwater's stance. So and I wouldn't necessarily say there are data points, but of course, I'd be more than happy to share whatever is given to me.
Okay. Just wanted to learn about that contract and services. Thanks.
Consent? All right, 11.1.
Council, the next three items are actually mine, which doesn't happen very often, but I have three items. What can I say? This one is something I've been discussing with Ms. Clayton and with my colleagues in the city attorney's office. When the Code Enforcement Board imposes fines, they will give a certain amount of time for the fine to be paid. And if that fine goes unpaid for a period of time, eventually the city's going to record a lien, as most cities will do. Once we record a lien, the lien just kind of hangs out there and encumbers the property, and oftentimes what will happen is a buyer will come in wanting to take over the property, clean up the property, etc. When that happens, someone has to make a decision as to whether that lien will be released, whether it's compromised, whether we settle, whether we negotiate, but there's no lawsuit that's been filed and no lawsuit that's been authorized yet by the council. In fact, it may not even be possible to file a lawsuit because it may be homestead property, as is often the case. So the question is, how do we handle those interim situations when a lien is outstanding and someone has to decide whether to compromise, settle, or extinguish that lien? There's really only three choices. By default, it goes to the city council. The second option is for council to delegate staff to make that decision, and the third option is for council to delegate the Code Enforcement Board. Has to be one of the three. I've spoken with Ms. Clayton about this. Our position is that it's best for the Code Enforcement Board to make that decision. Number one, it takes staff kind of out of it politically. Number two, it takes council out of it politically. And number three, because the Code Enforcement Board is the entity that imposed the fine or heard the case, they're really the ones who know best of all what the score is, so to speak, and what the status of the property is. And so they're probably the best ones to make that decision. So we have spoken with the Code Enforcement Board's attorney, who of course is independent of the city attorney's office because that board is quasi-judicial, and they are prepared to accept that assignment if council approves this item.
Any questions for Mr. Margolis? 11.2.
11.2, also my item. This is something that doesn't come up very often, at least in a medium-sized city like Clearwater. It comes up more frequently in very large cities like Tampa and Orlando that have larger police departments. This can happen in other departments as well, but it's primarily a police issue. So when we do get sued, typically speaking, depending on the type of lawsuit that gets filed, either the city of Clearwater is named as the defendant or individual employees are named as defendants, or both, depending on the type of lawsuit. If it's a police-related incident, usually they're going to name both. In fact, they'll usually name everyone and their mother. Typically, the city's a defendant, police officers involved are a defendant, the chief's getting named as a defendant, everyone gets named as a defendant in these types of cases. The city attorney's office is responsible for representing and defending all of our individual employees when they get sued, in fact, including even former employees. In fact, we have a case right now that's not a police case, but we have a case right now where one of our former employees is being sued where the city attorney's office is handling that representation. However, in certain cases, there can be a conflict of interests between the city as a defendant versus the individual employee who is being sued. In most cases, that's not a problem because in most cases, our position as a city is the same position that the employee takes, meaning we did nothing wrong, and there's a joint defense. But every once in a while, there can be a situation where an individual employee gets sued, And yet the city's position is that employee was in the wrong. And we don't agree with what that employee did. And in fact, that employee may have been disciplined or in some cases even terminated. So when we run into conflicts like that, the city attorney's office cannot ethically represent both the individual employee who is being sued as well as the city proper, because our defenses are completely opposed to each other. So in these situations, we do need to have outside counsel ethically come in and represent the interests of the individual employee, since the city attorney's office will be defending the city proper. That's what this is all about. This will come up, I'd say, 90% of the time in a police case. It would be rare for it to come up outside the police department, but that's where it typically comes up. Mr. Days has an office in Safety Harbor. He's done a lot of work for the Tampa Police Department, as well as other law enforcement related interests, and is pretty well respected. I've done quite a bit of research on him and his work, and he came highly recommended by my counterpart in Tampa, so I'm pleased to recommend him to the city.
Any questions? I was surprised by the rate.
High or low?
Low.
Well, we negotiated it.
Okay. Consent?
Yes.
11.3.
As you know, I tend to be studious with taxpayer dollars. So 11.3, also my item, this is the PSTA exchange agreement. Even though council has already approved the exchange with PSTA, Mr. Zimmett and I, who represents PSTA, have been talking about just a little bit of the timelines. As we know, both the city has been doing some environmental work, PSTA is doing some environmental work, and we also were working on the lease for the old bus terminal, because remember, even though we're going to be swapping the property in April or May, the city still needs to lease back the bus terminal, because even though we'll be the owner of it, PSTA still has to use it for potentially a couple of years. So Mr. Zimmett and I were working on that together, and that's pretty much all this is for 11.3.
Any questions? Okay. Anything else, Ms. Poirrier?
No, I just wanted to say thank you to both staff, the council, and all the external people that have reached out in terms of resources to the city. The support has been immense, and we are working on getting the calendars coordinated to meet with stakeholders to ensure that things are still going to continue to move forward. So I thank for everybody's patience while I march those calendars, and certainly look forward to working with everybody.
Anything else, Mr. Margolis?
Yes.
All right, council discussion items. Discuss city manager position, description, and expectations. Vice Mayor, do you want to lead off where you were hoping to go?
Well, I had so I pulled off of my bookshelf in the office the flyer, the materials that we used to search for the first for Mr. Jennings, and you've all got them attached. So there's a candidate profile, and I'm wondering how we can beef it up or be more focused or pointed in what we're looking for based on our learnings from the last year. And I didn't know if we wanted to include maybe competence or aptitude in navigating the sunshine laws. Not that they have to be from Florida, that person has to live or be from Florida, but certainly be aware of them and the challenges that they present a little bit as far as managing. And I think a clear understanding of the city manager council form of government and how that operates, that's a priority. And then I think, I don't know, they've got, the language here is being collaborative, strategic and collaborative, facilitating compromise and problem solving among competing stakeholder interests will have a distinct advantage. All that's good. I want to know, do we want to include something about transparency and facilitating these kinds of directions in the public eye on the front end. I mean, when I look back, I think that's part of the problem, is that I don't feel like I was brought in along on the front end enough, and that I don't think that a lot of times on big projects, and I'm only talking about big things, that we gave direction as a whole in public. And I get that it doesn't have to be uniform direction to send a city manager, to do his or her work, but it should at least be a majority, you know what I mean? So those are things I think are important. I mean, I just think this can be sharpened up a little bit.
Councilmember Albrecht.
And I'm fine with sharpening it up, but what I don't want to do is, I don't want to tie the hands of the city manager. And, as I said before, the thing that I thought John lacked was, he was free to go out and see what kind of deals there were out there, but before he went to the final step of securing the deal, it should come back to us. But I don't want, it's just like anything, when you make so many specifications and we want this to be, it really, I think it ties the process down. I want to let him be free to go out and do what he can, but bring it back to us to make the final decision. I don't know how you put that in there, but...
I think part of the problem is the city manager, male or female, just giving some direction earlier on, rather than, to me, I think that was one of the things I found most challenging, is not being brought in along on regular reports. I think collectively as a whole, all getting the same information. Regular reports along the way about what's in play, how does it look, what are the concerns, what's important to you, and we can do that one-on-one, but then also as a collective in public, so there's a uniform communication.
I looked over the material. When you go out looking for a city manager, you're selling the city, and you're kind of giving a view of what the city's all about and whatnot. But I don't know that I want to be so prescriptive that we potentially limit the candidate pool. I've been thinking a lot about everything that's occurred over the last 3.5 weeks. And Mr. Jennings, out of the 4 finalists, in my opinion, had more upside, but he also had more downside. So, in my opinion, we got downside. I know 2 people on the dais don't agree with that. But I felt like 3 of the candidates were caretakers, and there's nothing wrong with that. You need to make sure the trains run on time and, everything gets done. At the same time, you also need to shake things up at times and try to really make some advancements. And I felt like that was the position that we were in when we were interviewing. And that's kind of was the differentiating factor. I'd love to have somebody that makes sure that everything gets done, that we understand our roles and responsibilities of us setting policy, and then the manager administrating and managing the staff. I think certainly that will be made clear, even more so in this next process. Frankly, Councilmember Teixeira wasn't here. You 2 are relatively new.
Yeah.
I think you've got a lot more experience under your belt today than when we hired Mr. Jennings. Would you agree with that? You'll know some more things that you'll probably be looking for in the process. No, go ahead.
No, I would also say that, I was pointing out the fact that there were people marching in the streets up in Portland against the guy. And there were troubling things with him being vindictive toward the firefighters. So there could be issues here. So, I was trying to be perceptive at that point.
That's what I mean. There was potential downside. I mean, I have talked to people since. Well, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. But anyway, I don't know if it's the sunshine law that maybe we want to add, confidence and knowledge of and confidence in navigating that or something, but.
But I don't want to limit it to Florida candidates.
No, I agree. I don't either.
That's a problem.
Yeah. All right,
Because
well,
we're somewhat unique.
yeah, and
Councilmember Teixeira.
I don't think it was a matter of knowledge or experience, it was belief or attitude. So whether they come from Florida or somewhere else, there had to be a commitment or an attitude to adopt or adapt to being in Florida. That did not exist. So I don't think it's knowledge or experience with the Sunshine Law. It was inability or refusal of adhering to that.
Yeah.
And sunshine was talked about, at least in my interview.
Oh, yeah.
That it was different than almost anywhere else in the country.
You're right. I mean, I certainly can speak for myself in having more confidence and more experience to ask better questions and get a better feel in an interview now. And so it's on us. So if we're not going to change things much or whatever, but we are going to go with a different firm than Baker Tilly, correct?
I would hope so.
Okay.
I did forward on to Ms. Poirrier, somebody that the county has used and recommended highly. That doesn't mean that's the company to use, but they've got a much larger database than Baker Tilly. So.
Okay.
Anything else on this? All right, 14.2, discuss downtown land swap.
Yeah.
What do you want to swap?
Well, I just, I just want to be clear with, new leadership, whoever our leadership's going to be, that it's my belief that discussions involving selling or swapping city property, wherever it is, are often sensitive. And I don't want to usurp anybody's ability to negotiate, but for me, I think it's very important that council is brought in very early on about what sort of properties we're talking about changing or swapping or selling, and that includes, addresses that are on our affordable housing list, short list. It includes PSTA kind of things, everything. And I just think before we waste time of a city manager or city staff in talking about land swaps or selling, certain property, you better be, I don't think there should be surprises up here, and so I had asked John, what addresses are we talking about as far as, what's on the table as we're shifting cards around or whatever. And, I think we need to understand what those are. And I think we need to give direction as a collective, which ones we think should be in play or not.
Now, are you talking about land swaps with PSTA, or are you talking about land swaps with the Church of Scientology?
With anything.
With
any land swap. I just think, it's just to have a good idea of how we feel about it. I know that there was a property that got taken off of our affordable housing list that I'm like, well, how did that happen? And it's just an awareness of what's going on and not be surprised. I just don't want to be surprised about that. And I think really, because we know that property swaps and all that stuff downtown is very sensitive. I think we should commit to having discussions in public and not always one-on-ones and then come on up here, but I think we should have them up here as much as possible.
No, I think we ought to have a discussion. I don't know if anyone's willing to do a swap. I've said publicly, if it benefits the city and it's strategic, that I'm willing to do a swap. But it's got to be a great deal for the city.
It does have to be a great deal for the city, and I would say, Mayor, that in light of a lot of reporting about 4 times the amount in cash paid for properties, residents know that, right, those data points. And that needs to be acknowledged as well, because that's what residents know. That's what we know.
Councilmember Teixeira.
So one of the challenges that I felt were important was that when information was presented to me, and I've said this before, it was almost like a done deal, and I had 48 hours to approve it. And if I didn't approve it, then it's undue stress on the staff or on all the entities. And I think that's because we were not kept in the loop during the negotiations. There was never this, hey, this is where we're going, what do you think? And then reach consensus, or at least inform the council. So that when it got to us, I felt this incredible pressure to, you better rubber stamp it, because if you don't, you're ruining it, you know? And so this also applies to the land swap. I have asked repeatedly, what's being discussed? What's on the table? And it's always like, we're working on it, and then what? It was gonna present to its in January, and in a week we're supposed to approve it. Like, what I wish, and I think is something that I deserve, is to be included in the conversation, if at least to keep me in the loop. Because this last minute, approvals, I think is unfair to me, and unfair to all of us, and to those who have elected us. Because that's why we're here, is to represent those people who have elected us. And how can we do it if all these decisions are being made without our consent or a knowledge? And that also is one of the concerns with this land swap. I still have not heard where we're going with this, and the conversations have been going over for a year. Like, what kind of surprise is going to be thrown at me,
Councilmember Buck.
Well, I said that I'm open to a swap with Scientology as well, if it makes sense. And when John came in, John was talking about, maybe we can use eminent domain. And that quickly turned into, I'm on speed dial with David Miscavige. And I, sat back and said, let him have a chance here. Because I figured whatever deal comes before us, we would be level-headed and decide whether it was a good deal or not. But, one thing that we're lucky to have here is Tracy McManus is a very solid reporter, and she's been covering the Scientology beat in the Tampa Bay Times for years now. And early on, there was an article that she wrote where David Miscavige said, yeah, this was my idea to buy up all this property, so I asked the parishioners to join me, and we would create this plan for the downtown. And then a few months later, Miscavige started saying, oh, no, this is not coordinated. There was a meeting with council members individually back in 2017 where he said, we're done purchasing property, that's it. In the meantime, that very same moment, he was in the process of buying $26 million more worth of buildings, including the Atrium building. So we can't exactly trust what Miscavige says. I'm to the point now, and he's had every opportunity to deliver a vibrant downtown since 2017, and he has refused to do so. He's got this guy lined up in Tampa who's going to recruit all these businesses. What is stopping him? So my feeling at this point is, an acceptable swap was we give him the CMA property for $100 million worth of buildings he's been sitting on and doing nothing. That is what I think would be most appropriate. Are we going to get that? No. But, I'm just tired of Miscavige yanking us around.
Councilmember Albritton, anything?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I've always been the one to say we need to be talking with the church because when I first came onto council, we were not talking to the church, and the church was not talking to us. I think it was more from their end, just not trusting the people in government to talk to. But I agree with Mark. They've had these properties for a long time. I don't see any movement on it. If they really wanted to have a vibrant downtown, why aren't they doing something? Are they waiting for us? Look what we've done. We got Imagine Clearwater, and we've got development on the Bluff plan. There's a lot of things that are happening on our end, nothing on their end. So I still feel that we need to be talking, but the next city manager that comes in, my first word is going to be very careful with the church, because I don't see any progression, and I've been here all my life, first of all, to your point, back in, was it 2017 where he put on the show? And all that came out that he wanted to do this all for the downtown if we would give him that, the opportunity to buy that lot. The problem was that I had then was that I didn't want to see him do this. If he wanted to partner with the city and get it done, I was fine with that. But to lay it all on the church saying, here's what we're going to do, just didn't sit with me right. So until I see some kind of something from the church, I'm the same way. I just don't think I could really trust them to do that. But, we should have somebody talking with them and see where we can go with it. I'm fine with that. But they need to bring it to us and make sure we're aware of what they're doing, before something something is with the city manager and the church, it comes to fruition. We need to be involved in that final step on it, yay or nay. So, anyway. That's my 2 cents.
Well, we will always be included. It's a matter of when you find out the information.
Yeah.
Because it can't occur without the council. So, anything else on this?
Yeah, I just want to point out that, again, Miscavige and Scientology did not support the Bluff property vote. There was, there was one other thought that I had that's escaped me. So.
Okay. And then item 14.3, discuss city manager, attorney annual goals and uniform evaluation forms.
My laptop thing, my iPad's not behaving itself, but I think regardless of where we are with the search process of finding a new city manager, I think we owe it to our city attorney and incoming and interim, however long Jennifer is here, but to have a uniform evaluation form. I would suggest that we have it that uses descriptors like meets, exceeds, significantly exceeds, or does not meet as far as our expectations. I think that the city manager and city attorney should propose annual measurable goals that are tied to our strategic plan. So hopefully that strategic plan will be, being finalized.
Done before I leave.
I know. But, Mr. Margolis has provided annual measurable goals. We can agree on those. Perhaps someone, Billy and somebody in HR can provide us a sample template that uses those kinds of descriptors, so we're not caught with a number rating or a letter rating, but it's just a narrative. And then also, not only what did that city manager or city attorney achieve, but also, how did they do that? Who did they collaborate with? You know, what's their working style? You know, do they just bully in there and kind of do it all on their own? Or are they bringing different department leaders together and their peer and staff to make things happen? So I'd like to know, you know, how collaborative are they? So I think those things I've been thinking about for, you know, that's professional organizations outside of government, I think generally use something like meets, exceeds, significantly exceeds, or does not meet, or needs improvement or something. So it's just my thought. I would hope that we can do that sooner rather than later, because Mr. Margolis is already, you know, almost, 2.5 months into your second year of evaluation, and we haven't agreed upon any goals for him. He's supplied some, but we haven't had a discussion about what those are, or what our expectations are for him this year.
Other comments? Councilmember Teixeira?
If we are going to do this and actually do this as a council, my goal would be to be less subjective and be very objective. So the narrative to me is very subjective. And it's going to be tough because some of the things that you value, I might not necessarily value. You know what I mean? Like, I would prefer that the objectives were accomplished. I don't necessarily want to know who he's working with and how the person's working with and how they got to that point. Not at a year evaluation. It's always, to me, the outcome. So I think it's going to be a little bit tough for all of us to agree on how to do that. But I would prefer something more objective and not narrative.
Can I say, I would say it's not the ends justify the means, though. I mean, I think we do need to reflect on how a leader accomplished those goals. You know, I'm okay with having, again, they've got measurable goals, and it's either did you meet them or not, or how closely did you come. So that's not subjective, really, right? But then there are some other things, you're right, that can be a little more subjective. But I think, you know, it's not just meet this goal and I don't care how you got there.
That's not what I said.
Yeah.
But if you meet all the goals, then you pretty much know what the person's doing. But do I necessarily want to have a narrative about this person worked with this person for this goal for this amount of time? I think that if all the objectives are correct or well-written, then everything's going to fall under that umbrella without that whole narrative approach.
Well, I think there are qualitative measures that you can look at, and then there's quantitative measures. And, you know, quantitative measures tend to be really easy because they're measurable, and you can say you've accomplished this, and this. You've kept within budget. You've kept the head count within certain constraints. But the qualitative stuff can be as important, if not more so, in certain cases. And, you know, one of the things that I think John did well was lifting up some of the employees. You can't measure that. That's completely qualitative. And that's an important thing. It's one of the things that I heard from employees. It's something that I want to make certain that the next city manager understands and continues to build upon. But evaluations are just not as easy as just making, you know, a 5-page review and make it cut and dried. And no city manager is getting stuff done without a lot of collaboration. There's almost 2,000 employees in this city, and no single individual, man, woman, or deity could get everything done without working with somebody else and delegating responsibilities. I think one of the most important things is somebody that is going to really put a good team together that they know that they can rely on, give them the marching orders, and they know things are going to get done and done right.
Well, one thing I also thought about was perhaps for the first 2 years, we have a mid-year review, just a council work session discussion item on how are things going for the first 2 years, and then after that, it could just be an annual. I think, it's just kind of a good idea, because, you kind of see some patterns and things develop that you might want to comment on before a whole year goes by.
Are you talking to the manager and attorney, though, on a weekly basis? I mean, I look at it like sailing. There's course corrections all the time. This shouldn't have come as a big surprise.
No, I agree. I don't think it did. I mean, I think, at least for the three of us, I think.
So,
But I also think, in respect to residents, and for us speaking together, and perhaps for Councilmember Bunker or Albritton, who didn't see this coming or understand some of the concerns, if we did have a mid-year review for the first couple of years for anybody new, that might help with that. It's not pleasant. I know it's not pleasant to talk about that stuff in public, right?
it's not that. I also am very cautious about ever undermining the confidence that people have in their government. And it happens. I think you have to guard that very carefully. I just think course corrections happen on a weekly basis when you're having your meetings. But, I mean, any comments from our HR director or existing city manager, acting?
So I was wondering with this evaluation process, if it's something that you could consider discussing during your strategic session. Is that appropriate as a way to kind of bring all these thoughts together and come up with a plan? I can provide you, kind of a template to work from.
That's fine. I mean, I worked a lot on that one evaluation. You all just shot it down. So that's fine. Lots of hours on that. But
It was a good,
It was good. I used it.
Okay, as long as we have enough time in strategic planning. Otherwise, maybe we just want it on another work session to talk about.
I think it would be better on a separate work session or an item when we know we're going to have a lighter agenda.
Yeah.
Or just a standalone.
But again, Mr. Margolis is being, he's in his second year, here he goes, and he doesn't have an agreed-upon evaluation for him.
He's going to be harder than the city manager. The city attorney is a different animal than the city manager. City managers, right?
I wonder what kind of animal I would be. I was just trying to think.
You are a different animal.
Trying to think what I would compare myself to. Yeah, I mean, I have candidly worked in a couple different environments in terms of the review process. I came from an environment, somewhat, I think, to people's surprise, where they did not actually do attorney reviews at all. And then I've been in an environment where I was reviewed very closely with SMART goals, with a complex weighted metric system where it was, depending on the year, it was either 60-40 or 40-60 the other way for goals versus qualitative measures, et cetera. So I've been in both rubrics, one where there was very, very consistent feedback with very, very detailed layout, and then the other where there was virtually none, and the philosophy was, hey, if I'm doing a bad job, they'll just fire me. And I've literally been in both extremes. It is challenging because, number one, as the concern the mayor raised, there is definitely that public aspect to it. But number two, it's also hard because all five of you, as we all know, are so different from each other and are not able to really collaborate outside of the sunshine for it. And so that's what has made this process challenging. I've asked folks like Gina DeWitt, who have been here for a long time, how this conversation has gone in the past. And she has told me that it's come up over the years, and it's been hard over the years for council to reach consensus on it. So it's not the first time the conversations come up. I'm certainly happy to do whatever council asks of me, and for what it's worth, regardless of whether they are formal goals or not, I have shared my goals for this year with the vice mayor, and at least from my perspective, and until the council changes my priorities, those are the things that I am prioritizing this year. Things like the PSTA land swap, things like Peace Memorial, which are now done on the deed side, things like the bluffs, all those things are going to be in progress regardless of whether they are formalized or not. But if council wants to either change the direction as far as goals, that can be part of strategic planning, or on the qualitative side, it's up to the council to decide, what's important to you. And the truth is that, one day we'll have a different council, and they'll probably have different priorities, just like each of you have different priorities than your predecessors. It's just the nature of public service.
In his evaluation form that I put together, I asked him to go through the whole thing and make recommendations, and we did that and made some tweaks. So. Okay. New business for future meetings. Yes, sir.
I'd like to bring up the mangrove cutting on the causeway once again, because there's been somebody that has stepped up that wants to do it at his cost. He wants to absorb the cost, not on the whole, but from Island Way on the north side of the causeway, from Island Way to the small bridge. He wants to trim the mangroves and then remove the invasive species, and he'll pay for that. He's got a certified arborist that he's working with that's certified in mangrove trimming. The only thing he asks is if the city could,
Get the
take
permits.
He probably will pay for the permit, but all he asked was that the city remove the debris.
So from Island Way to the Mandalay Channel Bridge on the north side.
Yeah.
Well, we can add that.
And they can only take down like 4 feet or something at once, or something like that? Isn't there?
Well, whatever, if the mangroves are like 18 feet, they can only take a third
Okay.
to trim that. But I think the main thing that you're gonna see a lot of results is the invasive species, just getting them removed.
Other items?
I do. I have a
Okay.
whole, all right, so buckle up. It doesn't have to all happen on the next meeting, right? So this is just, okay. So TDC is still waiting for a presentation. Solar study, would like that presentation or recommendation. We've been waiting on that for a number of months. Apparently there's a noise ordinance that's being worked on that'll complement whatever's going on at Imagine Clearwater. I bring that up because someone on Sand Key brought up the noise ordinance. Apparently they can hear noise from shepherds, and when I communicated, I said, well, I think we're working on this new noise ordinance. I don't have a date for when it's coming. Plus, there's a lot of beach, complaints about noise. I had asked maybe when Gina was here about, I had on my list of some information from the BTR, the business tax receipts. Can we really look at how many new businesses, how many did we lose? Did people answer those demographic questions? The 211 presentation hopefully is coming, soon. Along those lines, I wanted to understand the funding and our participation in the cold night shelters. So I've worked a number of years at the cold night shelters. MLK was last year. This year we were at United Methodist Church, at your church, and just want to understand, who funds those, how my position as the chair of the COC this year, and I think it's like a 2 or 3 year position, depending on if I'm reelected. But anyway, they play a part in that, the HLA does, and I just want an understanding of what the different municipalities' roles and where those are. When we think about the county lane presentation, about staying in our lane and who funds this lane or that lane, I'm going to be meeting with the county tomorrow as part of that opioid settlement task force, and thought I'd ask about, I don't know if anybody's reached out from the city about who could do that presentation, but the more I thought about it, the more I'd like that presentation to be given somebody who works with social service as well as somebody who can speak to finance at the same time, so that there isn't a whole, this is what we do, but there just isn't enough money or this money, so we can have a joint presentation from the county about what their responsibilities are. Do they focus primarily on unincorporated? How do they work with the municipalities in the county? That kind of thing. And I will tell you, in the last COC meeting we had, right before Christmas was a joint meeting between providers and funders in the county, and there was great interest in understanding what's going to be talked about in whose lane presentation. So these are, these would be entitlement cities, Largo, St. Pete, Clearwater, and Pinellas Park, I think, as well as, the providers. Then I wanted to think about what are the expectations for the next strategic planning meeting? What are we thinking we want to get out of that? Are they going to come with a template? Are we filling in the template with different goals? I'd like to discuss sometime in the future, hopefully the near future, what we think is important on our economic development and housing dashboard. I'm really, it's taking me a long time, and I'm not there yet, in understanding all the intricacies in funding and working for more housing options in our city, in our region. And in trying to figure that out, I want to have a dashboard on our city that's easy enough for me to understand and residents to understand. For example, I just learned about this new federal law, and I have it. I don't think I printed it out here, but it's the one where if if the city gets credit for a certain number of housing units using HUD funding, that the developer has to hire people with a living wage, prevailing wage. Do you know that that U.S. federal statute about anyway, I talked to Denise about it, and
You mean from a construction
from a
perspective?
construction perspective. Do you know that? It's Baker something maybe? I don't know, Baker's in there. It's a two-name statute. But anyway, it's like, oh my gosh, this is ridiculous. This is why on our housing stats that go up to HUD, it looks like we're not developing enough. We don't get credit for all of it because that developer hasn't signed on to take enough of our money for certain units, because then that developer would have to pay prevailing wage or something. Anyway, I mean, that's probably not fully accurate, but it's one of those light bulb moments that's like, well, this is why our numbers don't look as good as they should or could. But anyway, I think it's important to have a conversation about what we want to see on that housing and economic development dashboard, along with jobs created, businesses brought into Clearwater, all that stuff. And then, okay, and then this is, this has to do with that Airpark contract and all that stuff. And I just was hoping we could send a unified direction that the Office of Innovation will be brought in on any agenda item, any development, any contract, to advocate for our sustainability and green print goals, so that I don't have to keep asking questions like, well, are you going to put solar on that? Are you going to put EV chargers on that? It would be, whenever a contract like the Airpark comes before us, it would be, here's the paragraph that the Office of Innovation or Department of Sustainability comments on, right? I mean, that just should be standard operating procedure. That's what I'm hoping. And then finally, there are these two state laws that are in effect now, and there's this MIA's law. I went to the Sandkey Civic Association meeting, and there was a discussion about MIA's law that now requires national background checks, a 24-hour notice before entry for maintenance, repairs, and policies for master keys to show who has access in apartment landlords. So we've got to conduct background checks on anybody who goes in. So that's something that I think, because we have a lot of renters and apartment complexes, it's a certain number. I don't think it applies to just a duplex or a single-family rental. But I think maybe a brief presentation from our state lobbyist so that it can be recorded at a work session so apartment managers can know that. And then the other one that I'm, I think is important is the public notices. Lawmakers approved a measure, House Bill 7049, that will allow local governments to publish legal notices on county websites instead of in newspapers. Local governments in counties with fewer than 160,000 residents must first hold public hearings. But I mean, we need to publish these things in newspapers. I know people don't always read the newspaper, but it's part of, getting information out there. And ideally, it's bigger than, 3-point font. Even though it says at the bottom, a copy of this ad in large print is available, which is larger font than what you're reading up here. But I think we should pay another $8 and make sure it's legible or whatever.
Ms. Call.
So there is a cost when it comes to the newspaper ad, but in terms of the online notice, we have reached out to Pinellas County because we would have to advertise through them. I don't know if there is an interest. I went on their website, could not find it. I've asked my assigned attorney to contact them. The implication is the ADA requirements.
Oh.
So there's a lot of metadata and as you can see, particularly with that kind of an ad where you have all that, the map that needs to be entered manually. So that's one reason why we have not gone in that direction yet. But depending on how those conversations with the county go, then it may be something that we consider, but at this point we have not. But regarding the size of the ad, I understand. That's why they can reach us. We can always provide a copy of the notice in a larger font. It is available online. We do post ours on our website online, but there is a cost for the size of our ads.
What would be that like about? So this is a Wednesday and a Sunday paper, right?
We don't post in Sunday because of the cost.
Okay.
So usually we're talking $500 on the average.
For one? Okay.
For one, and it usually runs
$500?
twice.
Yeah.
I think annually, the last time I checked was about $50,000 just on our newspaper ads annually.
And at one point, I think we even had in our legislative agenda.
And we have it several times, and actually last year, that was how they fixed it. Okay, we will allow you to do electronic or online advertising, but you have to go through the county's website. And so, in a sense, it kind of, I don't want to say defeat the purpose, but I mean, you have to now go to another agency and ask them, well, are you doing this? And if so, what are those requirements for us to advertise through your site?
And timelines and all that stuff that you're navigating there.
I'm sure, and then I'm sure that would be one of those requirements as well.
Well, two things I want to talk about at some point is, I think, and Mr. Margolis and I have talked about this, he thinks it can be accomplished through the contract with a future city manager. But I think if we ever go through a situation like this, which I won't, but for future councils, if there was a 3-2 vote on a manager, I think they ought to be automatically put on paid leave and allow the council to determine who the the acting city manager will be. We had some issues with communication on who was going to be the acting city manager because Mr. Jennings is the one that needed to do that. And so Mr. Margolis seems to think we can do it through a contract, but if we can't, I want to do it through our rules or even a charter change. The charter is going to be coming up next month, Ms. Call, so we'll be selecting. And I would just tell everybody if there are people that you think may be interested, they need to at least put an application in. The other thing is, I think we ought to change some of the rules on letters. Personally, I don't think Ms. Call needs to be reading the letters here at the council meetings. I think those can be distributed to council members before the meeting, and we can read those. And I certainly don't think somebody who's in the chambers who wrote a letter, Ms. Call needs to be reading those letters when the individual is present. So I'd like to alter those things. Some of it was because of COVID, but I don't think all of those need to be read into the record. I think the council can set a cutoff point for letters, and she can distribute those to us. We will all read them prior to a council meeting, but I think that was very apparent to me this past Thursday. So I'd like to have that discussed at a future meeting. I don't know if anyone has any feelings about it at this time.
I think it's a good idea. I mean, I think it's a good idea to discuss it. I think, the city clerk doesn't read all the other attachments, and so if there's a deadline for getting those letters, we're responsible for reading them. Plus, it's public record, all the attached letters, correct? Everybody can read the attached letters on their own. It does take time.
And there's some letters she may not want to read
That's another thing I was thinking.
because of content.
Right, and we
I
have,
thought of that. There are times when you're reading something that you're uncomfortable with. You're using other people's words, but you're still saying it.
I'm just reading it.
Okay, anything else? All right, we're adjourned till Thursday.